Hey guys, tonight we're doing something a little different. You're not going to war, you're not getting knighted, and you're not discovering a new continent. Nope. Tonight you're just going out for a drink. Specifically to a medieval tavern. You probably won't survive this, let's be honest. Between questionable hygiene, stronger than expected brews, and a suspiciously stabby atmosphere, your chances are roughly on par with a chicken walking into a fox convention. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me what city you're watching from and what time it is right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You approach the tavern just after dusk. The streets are slick with who knows what. Rain, refuse, horse contributions. The smell hits first. Wet hay, rotting vegetables, and a thin tang of human effort. Then comes the sound, the muffled roar of voices shouting over one another, laughter, the thump of something or someone falling. A fiddle scrapes above it all, barely staying in tune. You hesitate for a heartbeat, then push the heavy wooden door open. It groans like it hasn't been oiled since the last plague. Inside it's dim, not romantic candlelit dim, more hope your eyes adjust quickly dim. Rushes cover the floor, meant to soak up the worst of the grime, but mostly just mash it around. Smoke hangs in the air from a central hearth, where something vaguely edible is being turned on a spit. Every surface, walls, tables, benches, is slick with generations of spilled drink, grease, and something sticky you don't want to identify. You step carefully. The tavern keeper, or more accurately the alewife, notices you. She doesn't smile, hospitality isn't really the point here, but she gestures toward an open bench. You wedge yourself in between a man in a wool tunic who's already swaying and another who smells like he wrestled a fish to death on the way over. You pretend not to gag. There's no ordering from a menu because there's no menu. You get what they've brewed today, and if you're lucky, it's more beer than backwash. Everyone is loud, no one is sober. This is not a place for polite conversation over artisanal charcuterie boards. This is a place for shouting, slapping the table, and occasionally vomiting into a corner when no one's looking, which is surprisingly often. The drink arrives, a heavy clay mug slammed in front of you. It's warm, not piping hot, just body temperature warm. You sip cautiously. It's sour, flat, and tastes vaguely of grass, but it gets the job done. Your lips tingle, your throat itches. This is not an IPA. Someone to your right starts singing, or maybe chanting? It's in some blend of Middle English and pure inebriation. People join in, off-key and enthusiastic. The song seems to be about a pig that stole someone's wife. The punchline lands and half the tavern erupts in laughter. The other half doesn't get it and throws bits of stale bread. You duck instinctively. A kid no older than 10 runs past carrying a tray with more mugs, likely the tavern keeper's son. His shirt is too big and he's barefoot. He stops to pick up a copper coin from the rushes, sniffs it, pockets it. The hustle starts early here. The economy runs on drink and grit. Speaking of drink, your mug is already being refilled, unasked. You take another gulp, this time a little braver. It goes down easier. Or maybe your taste buds have surrendered. In the corner, a group of men play dice, slamming their fists into the table and yelling numbers like they're casting spells. One of them stands and bellows, "Who wants to bet their boots?" He's not kidding. Someone does. The boots come off. The dice fly again. You wonder how many people have walked home barefoot from this place. Probably a lot. Someone bumps into you from behind, hard. You twist around to find a woman, flushed and grinning, swaying with a tray that holds only empty mugs. She looks at you, hiccups, then shuffles off, cackling like a witch. You're not sure if she works here or if she just picked up the tray because she needed something to hold on to. Either way, the energy in this room is chaotic neutral. Now the smell of roasting meat competes with the aroma of human. It's not bad, really, just overwhelming. Like being inside a soup someone forgot to refrigerate. Your stomach growls anyway. You haven't eaten since noon, and beer on an empty stomach is a bad medieval life choice. You wave to the alewife. She nods without looking and disappears. 10 minutes later, she plunks down a wooden plate. A slice of meat, hopefully pork, a hunk of brown bread, and a smear of what you pray is mustard. You eat with your fingers like everyone else, no forks. Spoons are a luxury, knives are personal, and napkins are theoretical. Dog brushes past your leg and snatches the rest of your bread. You let it go. You're not about to brawl with a street dog that probably has more scars than a crusader. At the next table, a debate is heating up. Something about whether the king is divinely chosen or just lucky. Voices rise. One man quotes a sermon. Another quotes a tavern joke. A third smacks the table and spills half his mug. You see hands twitch near knives. But then someone farts loudly and this whole table dissolves into laughter. Crisis averted. Across the room, a man in a hooded cloak is hunched over, sipping slowly and watching everything. Every tavern has one. No one talks to him. You don't either. He's probably a spy or a tax collector, or just really, really antisocial. Best not to find out. Outside, the night deepens. Inside, time slows. You've lost track of how much you've had to drink. It's enough. You feel warm, a little too warm. Your ears are buzzing. You lean back against the rough plank wall and let the hum of the tavern wash over you. Laughter, clinking, coughing, muttering prayers, singing. Someone calls for another round. The alewife sighs audibly. And just as you're starting to think, hey, maybe this isn't so bad, a fistfight breaks out near the hearth. You don't know what started it. No one does, but it's happening. A chair gets thrown. Someone hits the floor. A mug shatters. The dog howls. Welcome to the medieval tavern. You've made it through the first hour. Let's see if you can survive the rest of the night. There's something you notice as the brawl drags on, and it's not just that one of the fighters is missing a shoe and possibly a few teeth. No, it's that no one is particularly surprised. The fight isn't cleared up by guards or stopped by management. The alewife doesn't even pause what she's doing. She just sighs, grabs a broom, and starts nudging bystanders out of the way so they don't spill their drinks. The dog, now emboldened by the chaos, darts in to lick a bit of spilled gravy off someone's boot. You scoot back into the shadows a little, watching. Fists fly, insults follow, and eventually both combatants fall into a wheezing pile of tangled limbs and pride. One starts crying, the other laughs. The fight is over. Everyone claps. This is just a normal part of the evening. You drink more. By your third mug, the world softens at the edges. The sounds blur together. The thud of boots on wood, the chatter of gossip, the scrape of chairs, the hollow clunk of a tankard hitting the table. You start to think about how weird it is that no one really treats drinking here as a special occasion. There's no Friday night out culture. It's just life. You get up, you work, you drink, you sleep, then you do it all again. That's because in this world, getting drunk is less about cutting loose and more about staying alive, literally. Water isn't just suspect, it's dangerous. The streams outside town are used for everything, washing waste, sometimes even the occasional dead rat. Boiling water is a chore, and unless you're a monk or unusually cautious, you're probably not doing it. So beer? Beer is the safe choice. The brewing process kills most of the nasty stuff. Even children drink it, albeit weaker versions called small ale. So when someone says they've been drinking all day, that might mean they were just staying hydrated. Sort of. You remember someone mentioning this earlier in the night, over a game of knucklebones. A wiry man with a crooked nose had leaned in and said, "It's not drinking if it's part of your breakfast." Then he belched directly into your shoulder and lost the next round to a shoeless friar. It's at that point you start to notice the subtle gradient of drunkenness in the room. There's no binary switch, sober to wasted. It's more like a rolling tide. One man slouches in his chair, eyes glassy, swaying gently like a field of wheat. Across the room, a woman swirls her mug in slow motion, staring into it like it contains answers. Two lads at the hearth argue over whether they can drink ale upside down. One attempts it and ends up sputtering into the ashes. But there's a difference between tipsy and wasted, and people here know it. The man who trips and dumps his drink? He gets laughed at, sure, but he also gets a warning glance from the alewife. Sloppy drunk is bad for business. You want the room warm with cheer, not spinning with chaos. It's a balancing act, and it's one the regulars have mostly mastered. That's when someone next to you leans in and asks if you want to try the strong stuff. You're not even sure what that means, but you nod, because you've already made poor decisions, and why stop now? He pulls out a small jug from under his cloak. "Mead," he says, though it smells more like regret and distant bees. It burns going down, but in a good way. Sort of. You cough. He slaps you on the back hard enough to make your ears pop. It's weird to think of drunk as a daily setting, but in medieval times it kind of is. The line between functional and hammered is a narrow one, and a lot of people are walking it every day. Labourers drink to numb sore muscles, soldiers drink to sleep, women drink to take the edge off a world that expects them to work, serve and bear children without complaint. And you're drinking because you're in a strange time, in a stranger place, and the warm buzz keeps the weirdness at bay. But there's a fringe to all of this. See, not everyone thinks this casual sipping is okay. Religious reformers are already starting to grumble in sermons. The tavern is the devil's chapel, they say, and ale is the sermon. You chuckle at that, then realise it's not entirely wrong. There's ritual here, a community, a rhythm, people coming together to drown the day in foam and forget the cracks in the walls. Still, not everyone agrees on what drunk even means. One man you talk to says 3 cups is plenty. Another boasts he can drink 7 before feeling anything, which, given his expression, is a lie. Then there's a friar, maybe the same one from earlier, maybe not, they all blur together, who insists he's never been drunk, only meditatively inebriated. He blesses his mug before every sip, just in case. There's some debate among scholars today about just how drunk medieval people really were on a daily basis. Were they tipsy all the time, or just sipping low-alcohol brews throughout the day? Some historians say people had remarkable tolerance. Others argue they were just as wrecked as modern partygoers, but less likely to post about it afterward. You try to imagine a peasant TikTok and immediately regret it. Another mug. You think it's your 4th. Or 5th. A lightness fills your chest. Your limbs feel distant but pleasant. You laugh at something you don't quite hear. And now you're part of the blur, the tavern organism. You move with it, drink with it, become indistinct from it. And then, because of course, someone starts dancing. It's not elegant, it's not rhythmic. It's more like stomping with occasional twirls. But it's infectious. You're dragged up before you can protest. Someone claps, someone else begins pounding on the table in time. You shuffle, you sway, you don't trip too badly. Your head spins, but you're grinning. There's a kind of freedom here, even if it's messy and smells like sweat. You're surrounded by strangers, but you don't feel unsafe. For now. It's only when you sit down again, flushed and breathless, that you feel it. The creeping awareness that at some point the good kind of drunk might tip over into the kind you can't walk off. But that's not now. Right now you're just a little blurry around the edges, a little loose in the joints. You sip again. It's warm, familiar and slightly terrible. But it works. You've just levelled up from curious traveller to honorary tavern regular. Congratulations. Your reward? A headache tomorrow, and maybe a new tattoo if this night continues as expected. Somewhere around your 6th, or maybe 8th mug, you realise that the woman behind the counter has been watching you. Not suspiciously, just knowingly. Like she's seen 1,000 wide-eyed travellers fumble their way into the tavern, get caught up in the swirl of ale and sweat and song and slowly slide sideways into the straw-strewn floor. She's not just pouring drinks, she is the tavern. And her name, as someone near you slurs while elbowing a boiled onion into his mouth, is Maud. Or maybe Madge. No one quite agrees. She's not a barmaid. She's an alewife, and this is her kingdom. You make your way over, swaying only slightly, and perch on the edge of a barrel that doubles as a stool. Up close, Maud, or Madge, has the bearing of someone who doesn't have time for nonsense. Her sleeves are rolled up. Her hands are red and calloused from both kneading dough and dragging drunkards out by their tunics. She pulls a fresh jug from behind the bar, gives it a sniff and mutters something about it being a bit young. Then, without asking, she pours you a half mug. She brewed this herself. That's how it works here. Brewing isn't some artisanal side hustle or a hip weekend hobby. It's a serious, messy, essential business. And for centuries, especially in medieval towns and villages, it's mostly run by women. These brewsters, as they're called, are the backbone of the local economy. Part chemist, part hostess, part the social glue. It's estimated that in some towns, more than half of all beer sold is made by women, often out of their own homes or attached taverns like this one. You watch as she moves behind the bar, shifting pots and checking a bubbling cauldron that doesn't seem entirely under control. Brewing is done in small batches, often just enough for the week, sometimes less. It's not an exact science yet, but these women know what they're doing, by taste, by smell, by instinct honed over years of boiling, straining and praying the yeast behaves. You ask what's in it. She gives you a look like you just asked what's in fire. Grain, she says. Water. Thyme. Then she adds grudgingly, bit of mugwort, yarrow, maybe bog myrtle. You nod like you understand what any of that means. What you're drinking probably isn't hopped, Hops don't become common in brewing until later in the Middle Ages. Instead, brewsters use a mix of herbs and botanicals called grute, which adds flavour, bite, and possibly mild hallucinations if you overdo it. Which, let's be honest, you're probably about to. But the drink is just part of the show. These women are running full operations, sourcing grain, managing fires, keeping the books, sometimes just in their heads, and defending their territory from competitors. And competitors are a thing. If Maud sees another tavern down the road undercutting her price or watering down their ale, you'd better believe she'll be marching over there with her sleeves still rolled and a ladle in hand. This is business, and it's personal. Not that it's all smooth sailing. Brewing licenses are required in many towns, and surprise inspections by ale conners or tasters can make or break your reputation. One bad batch, one customer who dies from suspiciously foamy ale, and your livelihood could vanish. There's even a local guild, a fraternity of brewsters and alewives, that sets standards and settles disputes, often by taste-testing rival brews in very serious, very drunk meetings. Some say the church looks down on women who brew and sell ale. Others say monasteries are secretly trying to muscle in on the market with their own stronger brews, labelling them as for healing purposes only. There's even a fringe theory floating around that the classic witch stereotype, the pointy hat, the bubbling cauldron, the broom, is rooted in how brewsters looked and worked. They often wore tall hats to stand out in the market, stirred boiling mash in big pots, and used brooms outside their doors to signal they had fresh ale. So basically, your bartender tonight is also a pop culture icon. You're about to mention this when Maud is interrupted by a delivery. 2 sacks of barley dropped at the door by a red-faced teenager with their arms like fence posts. She inspects the grain with a glance, then tosses him a coin and a hunk of bread. Business done. She's back at the hearth, stirring the mash and muttering about temperature and thickness. You ask if she uses yeast. She smirks. Of course, it finds its own way in. Lives in the walls by now. That's not just a poetic turn of phrase. The yeasts used in these medieval brews are wild. Literally floating around in the air, clinging to wooden tools, lingering in the barrels. That means every brew tastes a little different, even when made from the same grain and water. Some are tangy, some sour, some bitter. One batch might make you feel warm and fuzzy, while the next leaves you questioning your life choices and wondering why your fingers feel like jelly. And there's no guarantee it won't kill you. Which brings us to a very real danger. Medieval ale isn't pasteurised, regulated, or monitored by any kind of health board. A bad brew could go rancid, carry toxic moulds, or ferment in unexpected ways. People do die from bad drink, but most accept it as part of the gamble. Life expectancy is already short. Might as well enjoy it while it lasts. You thank Maud, though you're not sure if she hears you, and drift back toward your spot at the table, mug in hand. Your legs feel made of soft bread. Everything glows just a little bit. The fire in the hearth crackles like a familiar song. You glance around and realise just how many women are moving in and out of the shadows here. Not just serving drinks, but making deals, taking bets, checking barrels. This world is their domain as much as any lord's castle or knight's battlefield. One woman shouts something from the back and Maud shouts back. A joke. The room laughs. You're still not sure what was said, but the feeling is contagious. By now the ale is fully settled into your bloodstream. Your thoughts float like driftwood. You feel good, really good, like you could dance, or cry, or hug the dog who's now asleep under your bench with someone's sock in its mouth. So here you are, tipsy, toasted, surrounded by brewsters, and still technically in one piece. You may not know what's in your drink, but you know who made it, and that matters. You wake up briefly, or maybe you never fully fell asleep. The floor underneath your bench is hard, uneven, and smells vaguely of spoiled onions and old leather. Someone's foot is in your personal space, or maybe your foot is in theirs. It's difficult to tell. What is clear, though, is that the tavern is still going strong. You blink slowly and sit up, trying to look casual, as if you meant to lie down in a puddle of lukewarm beer next to a mostly chewed chicken bone. The air is thicker now, richer. As the night deepens, so does the tavern's atmosphere. It's no longer bustling with the afternoon crowd of merchants and labourers, seeking shade and a quick drink. Now it's the regulars, the lifers, the people who don't have to be anywhere in the morning or who no longer care if they are. These folks have carved out their favourite corner, mug and conversational rabbit hole. Someone calls for a round, and the alewife, Maud, Madge, or maybe both depending on her mood, gives a groan that says she's done this too many times to count. She jerks her head toward a cluster of barrels lined up near the wall. No one goes up to a bar and places an order. Not really. There's no chalkboard with prices. There's no beer list. You just point, grunt, or raise your eyebrows and hope for the best. Currency here is half coin, half personal relationship. If Maud likes you, she gives you the good stuff. If she doesn't, well, you're drinking something suspiciously warm and bitter, possibly left over from last week. You find yourself wondering, how did people even decide what to drink back then? In a world before standardised brewing or brand labels, ale wasn't one thing, it was an experiment in a cup. Each batch could be wildly different in strength, taste, or effect. Some brews were light and weak, barely fermented, meant for children and workers who needed hydration more than intoxication. Others, strong enough to stagger a mule. The catch: there's no real way to tell by looking. No colour chart, no handy ABV percentage on the side. You take a sip, wait 5 minutes, and hope it doesn't make your tongue go numb. Tonight, Maud offers you a mug with a deep golden tint and a foamy top. It looks promising. You take a cautious sip. It's sour, not unpleasantly so, more like sharp cider with a wild edge. Your mouth puckers, then settles. Tastes like wood smoke and apples, and maybe just a hint of regret. But it's drinkable, definitely drinkable. Around you, people are drinking with a purpose. One man is clutching his mug like it's keeping him tethered to this mortal plane. Another sips slowly, watching the room like he's taking mental notes for a poem or a revenge plot. A woman nearby raises her mug and toasts. No one in particular, just the air. You toast back. It feels like the polite thing to do. There's no real drinks menu in a medieval tavern. You're mostly getting whatever's available, whatever's finished fermenting, still potable, and hasn't developed a layer of fuzz. Ale is the most common, but there might also be cider if it's apple season, or perry if there are pears, or mead if someone had a good year with the bees. Wine? That's rarer, expensive, reserved for nobles, clergy, or someone with very good connections. And even then it might be watered down, spiced up, or sweetened to cover up its general lack of charm. You hear someone nearby muttering about having been served blessed ale last week, by accident. Apparently it had been consecrated during a feast day and stored in the wrong barrel. He swears he got tipsy and saw a vision of St. Cuthbert in the fireplace. No one believes him, of course, but everyone's amused enough to listen. He repeats the story again for the table next to him, adding more detail this time. St. Cuthbert was smiling, holding a mug, and may or may not have winked. There's a fine line between drink and medicine in this world. Some ales are brewed with herbs like wormwood, sage, or fennel. Not just for taste, but for health, or at least what passes for it. You might be drinking something to cure a headache, or stop a cough, or fend off evil spirits. One old man insists that his nightly mug of beet-infused ale has kept his hair thick and his bowels like clockwork. You nod politely and take a larger sip of your own drink to avoid responding. Another odd feature: the strength of ale varies wildly, not just by recipe, but by geography, season, and how much the brewer was paying attention. In some towns, the ale is barely stronger than water. In others, it's potent enough to make a grown man cry in Middle English. And since nothing's labelled, most people figure it out the old-fashioned way. Trial and error. Lots of error. You glance over at a trio of younger men who are clearly in the error stage. One tries to stand, forgets he has legs, and sits right back down with a surprised noise. His friend is attempting to have a very serious conversation with a candlestick. The third is just laughing, no reason, just laughing. Somewhere in the mix, the ale taster shows up. He's not officially announced, but there's a man, portly, red-cheeked and carrying a wooden spoon, who makes his way through the room with practiced ease. He dips the spoon into various mugs and barrels, takes a taste, smacks his lips and grunts. His job? To make sure the ale being sold isn't poison, too sour or illegally weak. You watch him judge Maud's best barrel. He nods approvingly. She pretends not to care, but her smile flickers. It's a small victory. There's a strange kind of trust in this world of unlabelled brews. You rely on the tavern keeper's honesty, the brewer's skill, and maybe a pinch of superstition. People will claim they can tell if a brew's been cursed, or if a bad omen lingers in a batch. Some even carry little charms, tiny bones, saint medallions, rings of dried thyme, tucked in their belts or tied to the mugs themselves. Not because they believe in magic exactly, but because it doesn't hurt to be careful, especially when you're drinking something that might include mushrooms, thistle, or that weird root the apothecary swears is totally safe. You look down at your drink. It's almost gone. You're not sure if you're drunk or just marinated. The room sways a little as you stand. You hold onto the edge of the table and grin. You're still upright. That counts as a win. Across the room, the dice game has started again, louder this time. Somewhere near the fire, a man has begun singing a love ballad to what appears to be a chicken leg. You toast to him, he nods solemnly. You're officially part of the tavern now. The drinks may change, the names might shift, but this rhythm, this strange, warm, chaotic heartbeat, you found it, and it's going to carry you into the next round, whether your liver agrees or not. There's a sudden lull in the noise, and for a moment you wonder if the ale has finally caught up with your brain and hit the mute button. But no, it's real. The shouting dies down, the singing tapers off, and everyone seems to turn their attention toward the back corner of the tavern, where a makeshift table has been cleared. A few benches are pulled together. Someone tosses down a pair of carved bone dice, and just like that, the games begin. You're motioned over, not asked, invited with a jerk of the head and a nod that somehow says, "You look dumb enough to gamble drunk, come join." And you do, because your blood's warm, your judgment's foggy, and because, well, what else are you going to do? Knit? The game is simple in theory, throw the dice, highest total wins. But it quickly devolves into shouting, bragging, and the occasional accusation of cheating. Your first toss clatters across the table and lands in a small puddle of ale. Everyone waits. One die rests on a 6, the other rolls in slow motion, finally settling on a 1. "Unlucky," a man with a burned-off eyebrow declares. He slaps you on the back hard enough to rattle your ribs. Next up, a blacksmith whose hands are the size of hams. He laughs like a bear, throws like one too. The dice bounce high and roll far, one nearly flying into someone's soup. "8!" he roars, as though declaring victory in battle. The crowd whoops, coins change hands. You reach for your pouch and realise you're not entirely sure how much you've wagered. Or what? Someone wins a pair of socks, someone else trades a small wheel of cheese. One man throws in what he claims is a love token from a barmaid, though she denies it loudly and throws a potato at him. The games aren't just dice, though. There are drinking dares, too. A man challenges another to chug a full clay mug without stopping. The loser has to kiss the alewife's goat. The goat, apparently, lives behind the tavern, and is not known for being agreeable. The crowd loves it. You learn quickly that losing here is rarely the worst thing, refusing to play is. A burly man with ruddy cheeks and the kind of beard you could get lost in slams a mug on the table and yells, "3-man drink." You don't know what that is, and by the time you ask, someone's already passing you a jug. It tastes like fermented apples and betrayal. You drink because you've committed, and immediately regret every decision that led you to this moment. Your stomach hiccups. Your throat tries to rebel. You keep it together, barely. Then comes the eel. It's plopped onto the table on a splintery wooden plate coiled like a meat rope, boiled to a shade of grey that defies classification. It still glistens in a way that suggests it was alive yesterday and probably angry about it. The challenge is simple. Eat the eel, all of it, no tools, no seasoning, no questions. You've eaten worse, maybe. You pick up the eel. It's limp, rubbery, and smells like old socks and river slime. You take a bite. The texture is halfway between gummy worm and regret. The crowd howls, you chew, you swallow, you wish you hadn't, but you win the round, and someone slides a silver coin your way as if you've just bested a dragon. Games in the tavern aren't about money, not really. They're about reputation, swagger, and stories. Everyone wants to walk out tomorrow and say, "Remember when I made the night squire eat 3 onions and sing like a goose?" That's the real currency here. Tales worth retelling. And if you're lucky, you'll be remembered fondly. If not, you'll be remembered anyway. A boy with crooked teeth and too much energy for this hour spins atop on the table. It's handmade, carved from a piece of bone, and he dares anyone to beat his spin time. He's surprisingly good. You try. Yours wobbles immediately and topples into someone's mug. The crowd groans in theatrical disappointment. You bow dramatically. The boy calls you a cabbage. You're not even that. Nearby, a woman with a voice like gravel and a belt lined with empty flask loops takes on challengers in arm wrestling. She crushes 3 farmers in a row before letting a lanky traveller win on the 4th attempt. He celebrates too much, and she floors him with a flick of her wrist. He lands in the rushes with a smile on his face and a loaf of bread in his pocket that definitely wasn't his earlier. You begin to realise the games serve a social function. This isn't just people blowing off steam, it's bonding, reputation building, even matchmaking. People flirt through dares, test loyalty through bets, and size each other up over dice and bad puns. You see 2 men shaking hands with flourished bows after a particularly drawn-out riddle contest. The answer was an egg, apparently. It's always an egg. Not everything's fair, though. You overhear someone complain that a traveller with foreign coins got swindled earlier. challenged to drink something labelled dragon's breath. It turned out to be vinegar and mashed garlic, fermented with what may have been a beetle. He threw up and lost his boots. Lesson learned. Don't trust a man in a hat that looks like it used to be part of a curtain. Still, there's a sense of shared risk. Everyone's a little vulnerable in here, whether from drink, game, or general social confusion. You've already learned more about the man next to you than you ever wanted to know, including the fact that he once married a woman just to win a bet and had to annul it when her brother turned out to be a bishop. Long story. One particularly fascinating game involves a rooster, a blindfold, and a lot of yelling. The rules aren't clear, and you're pretty sure they're being made up as it goes along. The rooster escapes halfway through, pecking at ankles and causing 2 mugs to spill. It is, everyone agrees, the highlight of the night. You lean back in your seat and breathe in deeply. The mix of smells, roasted meat, smoke, sweat, spiced ale, and maybe something on fire, is oddly comforting now. The noise rolls over you like waves. The laughter, the challenges, the brief flashes of drama. Someone drops a lute, and it makes a noise like a dying cat. The crowd cheers anyway. Even as the games rage on, there's a thread of caution. No one pulls out a dagger. No one bets their house. There are unspoken limits, and the alewife enforces them with a glance or a strategically placed broom handle. It's fun but not lawless. Chaotic but with boundaries. Like medieval bumper cars. You realise you're smiling. Despite the eel, despite the sticky table, despite the noise and nonsense, and the alarming number of people who've already passed out. It's fun. It's real. It's raw and human and weirdly beautiful. And as someone yells for another round of Guess What's in the Mug, you realise the night is far from over. Your concept of time has completely eroded. Hours have passed, or maybe just minutes, and the tavern still throbs with life like a living, wheezing beast. The air is warmer now, thick with laughter and heat rising from human bodies crammed shoulder to shoulder. Someone opens the door briefly, letting in a cool draught and the unmistakable smell of wet horse. The room groans at the chill and promptly closes ranks again, heat restored by the collective breath and beer-fueled body warmth. And through it all, the drinks keep coming. There's no last call in a medieval tavern, no clean cut-off or fash of fluorescent lighting. The rhythm of the night is dictated by the bodies in the room, how long they can keep upright, how much coin they have left, and how loudly they snore when they finally face-plant into their trenchers. Right now, no one's quitting. In fact, it's somehow gotten livelier. A group by the hearth has started an impromptu drumbeat using cups, spoons, and the table itself. Another fellow is dancing a solo jig that looks like he's trying to fight invisible bees. And here's where things get weird. You notice that several people, clearly seasoned locals, aren't just tipsy. They're smashed, sloshed, positively medieval, and they started this evening in that state. You blink. How are they still conscious? You lean in toward a man slurring his way through a limerick about a sheep and ask when he arrived. "This morning," he grunts proudly, pouring another mug without spilling a drop. That's when it hits you. People in the Middle Ages didn't think of drinking as a night-only activity. For many, it starts at breakfast. The morning pint isn't just a luxury, it's a standard part of the day, right alongside the stale bread and bowl of barley porridge. Small ale, they call it. A weaker, lightly fermented drink with just enough alcohol to purify it and just enough body to keep you from passing out in the fields. Kids drink it, elders drink it, pregnant women drink it, everyone. You imagine starting every morning with beer instead of coffee, and suddenly half the behaviour in this tavern makes more sense. In fact, you hear tales of workers who request stronger morning brews on cold days to warm their blood. Farmhands swig as they harness oxen. Masons drink between stacking stones. Even monks in monasteries often brewed their own breakfast ales, just with a little more prayer added in. You recall hearing that the average medieval person might consume over a gallon of beer per day, not because they're all party animals, but because there simply aren't better options. Clean water is suspicious, milk spoils, wine is expensive, ale, reliable, cheap, and made locally. So yeah, morning drinking is a thing, and with it comes a new category of drunk, the day drunk. Across the room you spot a man sprawled in a corner, snoring so loudly he's practically harmonising with the fiddle music. Next to him, a younger man is still sipping carefully, eyes unfocused but dreamy. That's the afternoon lull. The point where the buzz mellows into a full-body hum and people start slipping into naps, sometimes mid-conversation, and no one bats an eye. Falling asleep in your beer is normal. Expected, even. The alewife nudges a passed-out merchant to make room for a new customer, sweeping a few coins into her apron without missing a beat. No judgment, just rotation. You overhear a story from a wrinkled cobbler about a baker who was once fired for falling into his own dough while drunk on morning ale. Rose-shaped loaf it was, he chuckles. Tasted like guilt and raisins. These tales are more than just tavern gossip, they're part of the cultural norm. Most people accept drunkenness as a natural state, especially if it's kept within bounds. Getting lightly drunk is even seen as healthy by some. Fortifying the blood, they call it. And while there's still social scorn for the truly sloppy, like the man currently vomiting into an empty boot, being buzzed throughout the day is no scandal. You start to reflect on just how central drinking is to the entire medieval experience, not just as a personal habit, but as a daily rhythm. It's woven into the workday, the meals, the ceremonies, even the punishments. You hear of towns where people are fined in mugs of ale instead of coin. Some employers even pay partially in drink. He gets a jug and a half for every cartload, says one woman near you, nodding toward a soot-covered man who might be half chimney. As you sip your latest mug, something that tastes like cider and cloves, you start to wonder if the real difference between medieval drunk and modern drunk isn't how much people drink, but how they feel about it. Today, drunkenness is either a celebration or a failing. Back then, it's just another state of being. Like hungry or cold or sore from work. Everyone cycles through it. Some just get there earlier in the day. That being said, there is a line, and you're fast approaching it. Your arms feel unusually long. Your head is warm in the strange way that precedes either deep philosophical insight or sudden unconsciousness. The man next to you is eating a whole onion like it's an apple. You've forgotten what day it is. You are, as the locals might put it, blessed with the cup. The room continues to swirl around you. Music, firelight, whispers, distant burps. Someone begins a clapping rhythm. Others join in. You do too. It's instinctive. You don't know the song, but it doesn't matter. The rhythm catches in your chest like a second heartbeat. People are singing, stomping, laughing. There's a sudden bang as a chair gives way under a man twice its weight. No one helps him up, but they do refill his mug. And just when you think the energy is about to plateau, someone rings a bell. An actual handbell, shaken furiously by a tall woman with cheeks as red as beetroot and eyes that sparkle with mischief. "Midnight game," she shouts, "or as close as we're going to guess." A cheer goes up. You've now entered the drunken second wind, a phase fueled by equal parts fermented optimism and a total disregard for tomorrow. She announces the rules to a game called Name 3 Sins, which involves drinking, shouting and pointing at people you suspect of questionable behaviour. The first sin named is eating communion bread for breakfast. The second is stealing your neighbour's pig and pretending it walked home with you. You name whistling in church. Someone names liking your own ballads. The group erupts into scandalised laughter. You're drunk, very drunk, maybe morning drunk, just 12 hours late, but you're still in the game. The alewife passes by, gives you a glance that reads, "Don't die on my floor." You nod solemnly. You've got a few hours left in you. Probably. You're halfway through your next mug when a hand slams down beside you, startling your half-dozing brain back into focus. You look up and into the deeply lined, flushed face of a man wearing a hooded robe, brown, rough spun, belted with rope. His cheeks are ruddy, his eyes bloodshot, and he smells strongly of pickled fish and divine purpose. "Move down, brother," he says with a grin that's somewhere between saintly and scandalous. "The Lord provides, but you're hogging the bench." You scoot over, of course, because you don't argue with monks, especially drunk ones. This man is a friar, or so he claims, and judging by the state of his sandals and the way he keeps reciting rhymed snippets of scripture between gulps of ale, you're inclined to believe him. He throws back his hood dramatically, revealing a balding head surrounded by a scruffy ring of hair that fluffs out like a lion who's given up on life. "I've walked 30 miles this week," he announces, as though the room had asked. "My sins are dusty, and my soul is parched." A barmaid, possibly the same one who fell into the fireplace earlier, brings him a drink before he even asks. You get the sense this isn't his first visit. The friar raises his mug in a solemn toast. "To the Virgin, to Saint Arnold." and to barley's blessed mercy. Then he drinks deep, lets out a long sigh and mutters something about divine fermentation. You raise your mug in response, feeling vaguely religious by osmosis. You might not think of monks and holy folk as regular tavern guests, but here's the thing, they absolutely are. The idea that the religious live strictly pious, sober lives, locked away in quiet stone rooms, praying and fasting and gently judging, is only part of the story. In medieval Europe, clergy drinkers are everywhere. Monks brew their own beer, some of them producing the most refined and potent beverages in the region. Monasteries often function as self-sustaining enterprises, and brewing is both a spiritual duty and a booming sideline business. The result? Men of God with better beer than anyone else, and sometimes less self-control than you'd expect. The friar beside you is on his fourth mug, casually quoting St. Augustine between belches. "Lord, make me chaste," he says, but not yet. He winks. You have no idea if he's joking or if that's a real quote. It probably is. Down the bench, a pilgrim in dust-caked boots is trying to sell a relic, allegedly the molar of St. Benedict. It's suspiciously large and suspiciously horse-like. He holds it aloft, slurring about divine protection, while a small crowd tries to decide whether he's a fraud, drunk, or both. A woman offers him 2 silver coins and a song in exchange. He accepts. Everyone claps. These pilgrims and monks aren't just welcome in the tavern, they're often a core part of the social fabric. Pilgrimages, after all, aren't just spiritual journeys, they're massive social events, full of walking, singing, sharing stories, eating strange food, and yes, drinking. A lot. The tavern is where pilgrims rest their blistered feet, tell tall tales about relics and miracles, and, if lucky, charm a few locals out of their supper. You watch as a small group gathers near the hearth, listening to a woman describe her trip to Canterbury. She claims she saw a man healed by a feather from the Archangel Gabriel's wing. The friar scoffs but doesn't argue. He's too busy finishing someone else's leftovers. And then there's the choir. You weren't expecting it, but suddenly 3 men in loose tunics stand, raise their mugs, and launch into a song, not a drunken bawdy tune, but something almost angelic. Latin, you think, harmonised, surprisingly beautiful. The whole tavern falls silent for half a moment, everyone half suspended in the music, half holding their drinks mid-air. When they finish, the room erupts into applause and a few slurred amens. Apparently they're from a local cathedral letting off steam after a holy day. "One foot in heaven, one in the mud," one of them says with a shrug, downing the rest of his drink. You're beginning to understand that for the medieval person, spiritual and alcoholic experiences aren't contradictory. They're deeply entwined. The divine is never far from the tavern door, just as sin is never far from the altar. Priests give sermons about temperance, then toast to a wedding feast. Monks brew beer for charity, then drink some for quality control. Saints warn against excess, but even they're invoked for safe fermentation. There's even a fringe belief, you hear this from a limping stonemason by the window, that drinking with a monk grants you partial indulgence, sort of a holy cheat code. If the man who blesses the beer also drinks it, he whispers, it's like confession in a cup. You're not sure that holds up theologically, but it's good enough for this crowd. You and the friar toast again, this time in honour of St. Brigid, patroness of beer. He insists she once turned bathwater into ale for visiting priests. You believe him, you want to believe him. Another man joins the table, a deacon, he claims, wearing a slightly stained tunic with a cross embroidered in the corner. He brings his own mug carved from oak and engraved with what might be scripture or just wavy lines. He debates the friar on the ethics of ale versus wine, quoting from some old text. They agree to disagree and drink in unison. You're now seated at what feels like the holiest drinking circle in town. They drink with purpose or with philosophy, with practice speed. One begins a game called Saint or Sinner, where you name someone in the room and argue whether they'd go to heaven. Someone points at the man chewing on his own bootlace. Sinner, so comes the unanimous judgment. Definitely. It's absurd, and it's also kind of beautiful. Even in their stupor, the monks and clergy carry a certain authority. People listen to them, laugh with them, and occasionally ask for advice. One woman asks the friar if she should marry the miller's son. "Can he sing?" the friar asks. "Like a frog," she replies. "Then no," he declares. The room laughs. She bows deeply and walks away, like that was the final answer. The evening has taken on a dreamlike quality. The candles flicker lower. The fire has burned down to embers. You're dizzy, drowsy, and a little awed. You started this night thinking medieval taverns were grimy places of chaos, and they are, but they're also places of communion, of shared joy, of strange holy chaos. As the friar begins a rendition of Ave Alleluia, slurring through the chorus and occasionally substituting in farm animal noises, you close your eyes and rest your forehead against the rim of your mug. Somewhere behind you, someone starts ringing a tiny handbell again, probably for no reason. And just you found yourself at the blurry intersection of faith and fermentation. At some point you realise the friar has disappeared. One moment he's leading a round of something that sounded vaguely like a hymn but had suspicious references to turnips, and the next he's simply gone. Maybe he floated off on a cloud of mead-soaked righteousness, or maybe he crawled under a bench and decided that was good enough for a night's rest. Either way, the absence leaves a quiet pocket around you, briefly anyway. And then someone starts singing. Not a chant, not a hymn, and definitely not on key. It begins as a tuneless hum from the hearth, grows into a slurred melody from a second voice near the door, and finally becomes a full disorderly chorus of drunken souls leaning into a medieval drinking song, like it's the only thing they collectively remember besides how to swallow ale. Bring us the ale, the good strong ale, that sings through the nose and bends the tail. The lyrics vary by participant. Some verses involve mythical beasts, others mention large, scandalous body parts. One man, possibly improvising, belts out a detailed complaint about his landlords to the tune of Greensleeves. You don't know the words, but you find yourself humming along anyway. It's that kind of night. In the Middle Ages, songs and drink go hand in hand, and not just polite little ballads sung around a fire. We're talking filthy, raucous, creatively obscene lyrics passed down through generations like treasured family heirlooms, the kind of songs that get stuck in your head for weeks and would absolutely get you kicked out of a modern choir. A man nearby bangs the table rhythmically, giving everyone a beat to follow. The song changes again, this time about a milkmaid and a priest, and neither of them comes out of the tale looking holy. Laughter erupts at the chorus, and you catch phrases in Middle English that sound dirty even before you translate them. Something about a goose, and an unfortunate misunderstanding involving a butter churn. It's loud, it's wild, and it's communal in the purest sense. These songs aren't performed so much as exploded, yelled out with crooked smiles, half-remembered rhymes, and unapologetic mispronunciations. People slap each other on the back, laugh mid-verse, and occasionally forget the words entirely. When that happens, they make up new ones. The goal isn't accuracy, it's volume. You spot a woman near the fire leading the room through what's clearly a favourite, an old drinking round in Latin, possibly once sung by students at a monastery before being corrupted by generations of ale and mischief. She gestures dramatically with her mug, voice gravelly but commanding. Everyone joins in, mangling the Latin with drunken elegance. Gaudiamus bibamus, nunc et semper hic. Let us drink and be merry now and always here. It's hard not to smile. You're watching language, religion, music, and total nonsense crash into one another in real time. And somehow it works. It's equal parts liturgical and ludicrous, a symphony conducted by collective inebriation and sheer willpower. You remember that literacy rates are low in the medieval world, especially among peasants. Most people can't read the Bible, or even the tavern slate board, where someone scrawled "no shoes, no credit" in bad Latin, but they do know the songs. These drinking tunes are how stories are passed down. Morals are learned, scandals are shared. Songs fill the space that books occupy now, only with more innuendo and occasional hiccups. You hear one man recite a bawdy poem from memory, complete with hand gestures and the kind of detail that suggests he's either been an excellent performer or personally lived through the events. It's about a monk, a donkey, and an ill-timed thunderstorm. The ending is lost to laughter. Someone demands an encore. He agrees, but only if someone else sings next. Another takes the stage, if you can call standing on a wobbly bench a stage, and starts a tune about alewives and their ability to outdrink kings. It's catchy, the rhymes are clever. The refrain involves a lot of foot stomping and a sound that might be intentional snorting. You're pulled into the rhythm before you can protest. You clap, shout, sing. The tavern becomes a single organism, buzzing, howling, hiccuping in three-part harmony. And in that moment, you start to understand the power of the tavern song. It's not just entertainment, It's release. It's identity. It's the closest thing some of these people get to therapy, to storytelling, to self-expression. There's a deep emotional truth woven into the ridiculousness. Even in the dirtiest rhymes, there are hints of fear, hope, longing. One ballad about a knight who can't stay on his horse because he's drunk, it's secretly about war trauma. A song about a girl who drinks all her father's mead and ends up married to a pig farmer. That's probably a cautionary tale, and a commentary on gender roles. If you're sober enough to think about it, you're not. And then someone sings a sad one. A slow, mournful tune about a lost lover and a winter that never ended. The room quiets. No one asks for it to stop. Even the loudmouth near the window, the one who tried to arm wrestle a chicken earlier, nods solemnly with the beat. This one's in the local dialect, thick and old, but you feel it more than understand it. It settles over the room like a blanket soaked in snow. The song ends, there's no applause, just silence and one soft murmur of "again." The singer doesn't repeat it though. He sips his drink and stares into the fire, and the moment passes. It's followed naturally by a return to filth. The song of the night. The cobbler's wife. A notorious drinking tune filled with euphemisms, bad puns, and a final verse so anatomically confusing it sparks a heated and very drunk debate over what exactly a sticky Stilton is supposed to symbolise. Someone suggests it's just cheese. Someone else insists it's a metaphor for a treacherous marriage. You decide to nod and sip. A fringe belief you overhear during the lull. Singing after drinking prevents possession. One old woman mutters it into her mug, warning that silence after heavy ale invites spirits. The laughter that follows is mostly nervous. Someone starts humming immediately, just in case. You hum too. As the songs continue, your head begins to feel like it's full of bees. Friendly bees. Drunk bees. But still buzzing. Your limbs have stopped belonging entirely to you. Your face is sore from smiling. And still you stay, because leaving now would be like walking out of a fever dream before the last verse. You need to see how this ends. One final round begins, led by a toothless shepherd with the lungs of a cathedral bell. It's about a fox who outdrinks an entire village. You don't follow all the lyrics, but you join in for the chorus anyway. Fill it, spill it, curse and cheer, sing for the fox and pour the beer. Your voice blends with the others, rough, out of tune, half forgotten, but whole. You're drunk, you're hoarse, and you're exactly where you need to be. It creeps in slowly, like a fog through a moor, or the moment right before a sneeze. The realization that the tavern smells indescribable. Not bad necessarily. Not in the way a modern dive bar smells after someone spills a rum and coke behind the radiator. This is more primal, layered. The kind of smell you don't just notice but experience. And once you do, you can't unsmell it. It's everywhere. You shift slightly on your bench, only to realise the bench is damp. Not fresh ale damp. No, this is the kind of damp that suggests the wood itself has absorbed centuries of human suffering. You can almost hear it sigh as you adjust your weight. Around you, the smells rise in a complex medieval bouquet. Sweat, unwashed, weeks old, yeasty ale funk, the rich musk of livestock, and something tangy that might be pickled herring, or someone's feet, possibly both. You try breathing through your mouth, but it doesn't help. That just gives you taste smell, which is worse. Medieval taverns don't come with ventilation. There are no overhead fans, no open concept layouts, just smoke-blackened beams and tiny windows so caked with soot they may as well be painted shut. The hearth helps with warmth, yes, but it also fills the air with a low-level haze. It's not unpleasant at first. Wood smoke always has a romantic edge, but by your 10th hour your eyes sting, your clothes have taken on the scent of a bonfire, and your lungs feel fuzzy. You glance up and notice cobwebs, not tucked away in the corner cobwebs, statement cobwebs, the kind that look like they've been grandfathered in by time and possibly have diplomatic immunity. A spider the size of a coin calmly observes the crowd from its perch above the door. You give it a respectful nod. A man near you removes his shoes. You didn't know he was wearing any until this moment. The release of his feet into the air is a chemical event. You cough discreetly. He doesn't notice. In fact, someone else nearby does the same. You wonder if this is a cultural thing. It's possible the locals associate taking your boots off with reaching peak comfort. Or maybe they're airing out their toes to avoid trench rot. Hard to say. And then someone lights a pipe. The smell shifts again, now it's sweet, pungent herby. You catch a note of something sharp, almost citrusy. The pipe makes its way around the table. When it reaches you, you're not entirely sure what's in it. Probably not tobacco, probably not legal by modern standards. You take a puff. It tastes like moss, honey, and regret. You pass it on. This is the olfactory reality of medieval tavern life. There's no Febreze, no cleaning schedule. If the rushes on the floor are changed once a season, that's considered overachieving. Most people don't bathe regularly, and even if they do, it's not enough to fight the daily coating of dust, animal grease, and human proximity. You've been here for hours and you already feel like your pores have absorbed the entire atmosphere. You're pretty sure you'll carry this smell home with you. Forever. The animals don't help. Yes, there are animals. You hear a goat bleating softly behind a partition. Chickens occasionally strut through the tavern like tiny drunks in feathered suits. No one questions it. Animals are part of life here, and that life is very indoorsy. One man keeps a ferret on a leash. Another has a hawk perched on his shoulder. You don't ask questions. You've stopped asking anything at this point. You just accept it like everything else. You lean back, trying to find a less sticky spot on the wall. No luck. Every surface is layered with grime and a glossy film of decades of communal use. The table in front of you has carvings etched deep into its surface. Names, tally marks, crude symbols, and what may be the earliest known drawing of someone mooning the king. As the hours drag on, the scent landscape deepens. Roasting meat. Some kind of game, judging by the smell, adds a savoury note to the air. Then there's spilled ale, fermenting in puddles under benches. Every so often someone knocks over a mug and the contents seep into the floor like an offering to the gods of decay. You can't escape it. It's in your hair, your clothes, your soul. It's not one smell, it's 1,000 tiny smells you pull, forming a symphony of human existence. A medieval funk. You wonder if people back then noticed it the way you do, or if they were simply used to living with their own human marinade. Probably the latter. One man proudly announces he hasn't bathed since the Feast of St. Martin. No one reacts, you're not surprised. Someone offers you a hunk of cheese, you accept out of politeness. It's hard, salty, and emits a smell that could strip paint. You chew slowly, resisting the urge to cry. Cheese in the Middle Ages isn't mild. It's a test of courage, a flavour that punches first and apologises never. A woman passes by with a bowl of what looks like onions and lard. It smells better than the cheese, sort of. You don't ask for a sample. And then, just when you think you've acclimated, a chamber pot is emptied. Not nearby, somewhere in the back. You hear the slosh, the scrape of a door, and the unmistakable sound of contents being poured into the alley. A warm breeze wafts it inside. The room groans. A man by the fire mutters something about God's vengeance. The tavern's hygiene, or lack thereof, is both legendary and entirely expected. Sanitation isn't a priority. Disease is a constant background threat, sure, but it's not blamed on filth. People believe illness comes from imbalances in humours, bad air, or divine punishment, not dirty rushes or mouldy mugs. That makes smell less a problem and more a normal part of the sensory background. You're not supposed to enjoy it. You're supposed to survive it. You catch wind of a fringe superstition from a baker, leaning on a stool leg that's clearly seen better centuries. He tells you that bad smells ward off evil spirits. They hate garlic and pig fat, he whispers, tapping his nose. That's why I wear the same tunic all week. You nod solemnly, as though this is the most reasonable explanation you've ever heard. Despite everything, the goat stink, the breathy pipe smoke, the smell of fear and possibly raw turnip, you stay. Because at some point, smell becomes background music. Your senses have dulled. Your standards have dropped. You've become one with the tavern. Stinky, sticky, and still drinking. And honestly, you've smelled worse things, like that time earlier when someone pulled out pickled eggs and left them open for 20 minutes. You survived that. You'll survive this, maybe. Your eyes start to water, not from emotion, just the air. But you raise your mug anyway, toast to nothing in particular, and drink. Because if you're going down in a haze of smoke, cheese, and sweat and glory. There's a low shout from the back of the tavern, a hoarse, slurred voice that sounds more like a cough with ambition than anything intelligible. You don't catch the words, but the shift in the room's energy is immediate and sharp. Conversations stop, mugs are slowly lowered, someone mutters, "Not again." You're still blinking dumbly at your ale when a wooden chair flies across the room and crashes into the wall, splinters spraying like angry confetti. Ah, so it's that part of the night. Brawls in medieval taverns are less like sudden eruptions and more like weather systems. You can feel them coming. The tension builds over time, through spilled drinks, muttered insults, maybe the fifth retelling of a joke that stopped being funny 3 ales ago. There's often a tipping point, a misunderstood gesture, a glance held too long, or someone reaching for someone else's mug with the wrong kind of enthusiasm. This time it starts between 2 men you vaguely remember from earlier, one with a scar down his cheek and the other with the eyebrows that look permanently surprised. You don't know what started it, no one ever does, but suddenly they're both on their feet, shouting in dialects that may as well be spells. One swings, the other ducks. A bench goes over, a mug flies. Chaos takes the wheel. You lean back just in time to avoid a crashing elbow and a splash of mystery liquid. It smells like vinegar and possibly regret. You don't ask. The tavern comes alive in a whole new way. It's no longer a place of music and ale, but of elbows and cursing and the occasional very creative insult involving someone's mother and a goat. A few regulars move away casually, mugs in hand, like they've seen this movie before and know how it ends. Others watch with glee, cheering like it's a sport. One man stands on a bench to get a better view. Someone bets a boiled egg on the man with the scar. And amid the chaos, Maud, ever the eternal battle-weary alewife, does not panic. She does not shout. She simply picks up her broom, marches into the fray and smacks both men across the backs of their heads with a precision honed through years of tavern management and possibly battlefield experience. The broom is the tavern equivalent of divine intervention. The fighting slows, one man wobbles, the other sits down, blinking like he forgot why he was standing. Maud points the broom at them both and says something short, sharp, and profoundly final. Neither man responds, they just nod. It's over. Just like that. You exhale, shoulders unclenching. Tavern brawls are messy but weirdly structured. Everyone knows the unspoken rules. No weapons, no killing, and absolutely no breaking the big jug by the fire. Fists, mugs, and the occasional slap are fair game. The brawlers rarely hold a grudge. By morning, they'll be nursing hangovers and comparing bruises like war wounds. You hear someone mutter that these two have fought 4 times this month, and last week they sang a duet afterward. But not every tavern scuffle is so neatly resolved. You learn from a butcher across the table, who's calmly eating something that looks like boiled tongue, that in rougher places, brawls escalate quickly. Knives come out, teeth come out. One tavern in a nearby village even keeps a designated fight table, a reinforced slab of wood stained with so much blood it's practically ceremonial. Better than the floor, the butcher says with a shrug, chewing slowly. And when someone does draw steel, things change. That's when the authorities get involved. Or not. Some towns have constables who'll drag you out by the hair and toss you in the stocks. Others rely on informal justice, like the alewife tossing you out into the street. Or worse, banning you from the tavern altogether. You hear that's how one man ended up drinking alone behind the tannery for a year. Poor bastard, someone says. Had to talk to his own thoughts. You also learn about the chamber pot incident. So, it's whispered about with reverence and horror. Apparently, during a brawl last year, one particularly creative woman climbed the stairs to the loft above, fetched a full chamber pot and upended it on the brawlers below. The fight ended instantly. One man sobbed, another left town. To this day, the smell of rosemary used later to cleanse the floor triggers violent flinching in several regulars. You file this away under do not mess with the upstairs patrons. Right on cue, a heavy clay jug thuds onto the table next to you. You look up to see the barmaid, flushed, wild-eyed, slightly limping, grinning, as she places a small dish of what might be dried plums, or might be someone's failed cooking experiment. For the nerves, she says. You nod as if that makes sense and sip the new drink. It tastes like spiced apple, soot, and a little bit of courage. Not bad. The brawlers are now back at the table, laughing. One has a black eye blooming like a fresh bruise bouquet, the other is missing a sleeve. Someone puts an arm around both and declares them blood brothers in barley. They toast. Everyone toasts. And just like that, the tavern resets. It's uncanny how quickly things return to normal. The music picks up again. Someone's plucking a lute in the corner, badly but enthusiastically. Dice rattle back onto the table. Someone jokes about starting a brawl league and assigning points for creativity. Another man volunteers to be a judge. but only if bribed with cheese. You notice that the rules of the tavern are fluid but enforced. Not by laws, but by custom, by community, by the quiet pressure of reputation. If you're a known troublemaker, people stop drinking with you. If you pick fights too often, Maud bans you or feeds you the special stew. No one talks about what's in it. Everyone respects it. And if you really cross the line, say you knock over a full barrel or insult someone's dead grandmother, you might find yourself tossed outside, face first into the mud, your shoes missing, and your dignity running off in the opposite direction. The tavern doesn't forget, but it does forgive, if you earn it. As the fire crackles and the laughter resumes, you settle back into your corner, your heart still thumping from the brief adrenaline spike. You raise your mug to your lips and take a long, calming sip. The drink is warmer now, a little flatter, but still good, still yours. And around you the tavern breathes again, smoky, rowdy and utterly alive. You're mid-sip, enjoying the afterglow of post-brawl calm, when a man in a fine doublet with a crushed feather in his hat stumbles past your table and drops a coin into someone's soup. He doesn't notice, he just keeps us going, bumping into a chair, then a stool, then a wall, like a pinball made of lace and entitlement. You watch, slightly mesmerised, as he attempts to flirt with the barmaid by quoting a poem and then forgets the ending halfway through, replacing the last line with, "And your eyes look like oil fish." This is how you meet the drunk tax collector. Nobody seems particularly thrilled about his presence. A few mutters ripple through the room, and one old man with a scarred lip mutters something like, "God protect my goats." You're about to ask what that means, when the tax collector returns, wobbling toward the centre of the room, arms raised as though inviting applause. "I," he slurs proudly, "am here for the betterment of your kingdom, your purse and your, well, whatever's left of your pigs." He tries to bow. He does not succeed. Here's the thing about tax collectors in medieval towns. They aren't just paper pushers, they are collectors in the most literal sense. They walk door to door, tavern to tavern, field to muddy field, shaking people down for whatever the crown, church or local lord says is owed. And they get a cut, which means they're incentivized to squeeze hard. This one apparently has decided to make his rounds after several too many rounds of ale. You wonder if this is strategy, lower resistance when people are too drunk to argue, or if he's simply riding the edge of corruption and incompetence like a particularly determined squirrel on a grease-coated fence. He announces that he's collecting the malt tax, then the ale duty, then something called bench occupation fee. People look at each other, eyebrows raised. Most ignore him. A few toss him the copper coins out of habit or guilt, or just to make him go away. One woman throws him a bone, literally, and he bows as though he's been knighted. He finally reaches your table, breath like boiled cabbage and fermented apples. He leans down and taps your mug with a single damp finger. "Drinking tax," he declares. You open your mouth, unsure whether to argue or laugh, but before you can say a word, he points at your bread crust. "And chewing tax," he adds. "Very expensive, premium chewing, that is." You glance around to see if anyone else is reacting. No one is. This is clearly not his first performance. You hand him a crumb, he pockets it with a flourish. The strange part is, he might actually be a legitimate tax collector. There's no uniform, no ID badge, but he does carry a small leather pouch filled with scribbled notes and what may be tally marks or just doodles of ducks. And in the corner of his parchment, you spot the royal seal, faint but real. Somehow, against all reason, this man represents the crown. Possibly. Another man nearby, broad-balding and clearly fed up, calls out, "Oi! You took my pig tithe twice last month, you thieving porridge!" The tax collector raises his arms in mock offence, stumbles backward, and bumps directly into a support beam. The barmaid shouts, "No dying against the timber, we just had it reinforced." He slides down the beam like melting wax, muttering, "Misunderstood genius." Despite his incompetence, or maybe because of it, he's tolerated. Loathed. Yes, but tolerated. That's often the way with local taxmen in this era. They walk the line between authority and public nuisance. No one likes them, but pushing them too far means inviting trouble from someone higher up the chain. And you don't want to draw attention from someone whose idea of due process involves shackles and cold stew. Still, not everyone plays along. You overhear the table next to you debating whether this tax collector is real or just a drunk with good stationery. One man, red-faced and wild-eyed, insists he saw the same guy tried to collect a song tax from a farmer's donkey last week. The donkey kicked him, he says proudly. That was the sound of justice. There's also talk of tax evasion techniques, most of them hilariously ineffective. One woman claims she keeps her coins in a hollow turnip to avoid detection. Another says she fakes possession by demons any time an official asks about her grain store. They don't tax the damned, she winks. Too messy. And naturally, there's a fringe theory floating around the tavern that some tax collectors aren't even human. They're sent by the king's alchemist, someone whispers, made from bones and lard and programmed to sniff out coin. You nod solemnly. That makes as much sense as anything else tonight. Meanwhile, your friendly neighbourhood collector is now attempting to climb onto a table to deliver what he calls a policy announcement. It starts with, henceforth, all drinking mugs must be registered by moonlight, and ends with him stepping on a spoon and face-planting into someone's stew. No one moves to help him. The barmaid walks over, takes the pouch off his belt, removes a few coins, and tosses it back beside his head. That's for the broken spoon, she mutters. 10 minutes later, he's snoring softly against the side of the hearth, hat pulled over his face, hands clutching a crust of bread like it's legal tender. You're not sure if he's asleep, unconscious, or simply paused. Either way, the tavern slowly returns to its rhythm. The fiddler tunes up again. Dice clatter. Someone pours you another drink with a grin and says, first one's free, second one's taxed, third one's blessed. You drink to that. What strikes you most about all of this isn't the absurdity, it's the normalcy of it. This is how systems work here. Chaotic, messy, reliant on reputation, personality, and a certain tolerance for nonsense. People joke about taxes in verse, pay in goat cheese, and file complaints by shouting them at clouds, and somehow the world turns anyway. You look at the man still passed out near the hearth, soup drying in his beard, and wonder if he'll wake up remembering anything. Probably not. But his pouch will be lighter, his reputation slightly worse, and his feather permanently soggy. And honestly, you've seen worse bureaucrats. At some point in the middle of the night, when times turn to soup and the walls feel like they're gently pulsing, you're handed a mug of something new. It's handed to you by a grinning man with no front teeth and the overly proud air of someone about to ruin your internal organs. Try this, he says, like a curse or a challenge. Just brewed, stronger than a confession and twice as honest. You raise it to your lips, already a little suspicious. It smells sharp. There's an herbaceous undertone, like wet grass, but it's drowned in a sour-sweet punch of something that makes your eyes water before the mugs even touches your mouth. You take a sip anyway, because bad decisions are really just adventures in disguise, and instantly feel your tongue recoil, curl, and contemplate resignation. This is not ale. This is gruit, or something close to it, an older, more chaotic cousin of beer, brewed without hops and instead flavoured with a mix of herbs that may or may not double as spell ingredients. Before hops became widespread in European brewing, gruit was the go-to, and its composition, completely unregulated. You got whatever the brewer had on hand, bog myrtle, yarrow, wild rosemary, mugwort, sage, sometimes even henbane, which, by the way, can cause hallucinations and potentially a brief meeting with the afterlife. The man watches you closely as you swallow. Bit of wormwood in that one, he says proudly. Clears the thoughts, or replaces them. Your tongue has gone a bit numb. That seems normal. You glance down into the mug. It's dark, cloudy, and sloshes in a way that feels accusatory. This isn't a drink, this is a brew with ambition. You take another sip because you're already in the river. Might as well swim. The second one isn't better. But it is warmer. Across the room, other mugs clink with different concoctions. Not every tavern drink is ale or gruit. Some brew herbal wines, spiked ciders, and regional oddities with names like black toe or throat coat that sound more like medieval injuries than beverages. Recipes change tavern to tavern, brewer to brewer. One innkeeper might swear by dried juniper berries. Another might favour fermented bread crusts and boiled cabbage. You ask someone about their drink, and they say it's made from soaked oats, goose fat, and a memory of honey. You nod like that's not horrifying. The truth is, ingredients are flexible and so are the results. You hear about a brew that once made a bishop speak fluent Flemish for a week, despite never having left Wessex. Another caused a man to smell purple for 3 days. No one even pretends to keep recipes consistent. Half the fun is seeing what happens. Each mug is a gamble. You might get pleasantly buzzed. You might meet your ancestors. Someone next to you offers a thimble of something amber and thick. It smells like burnt sugar and pine. Distilled, they whisper, as if sharing a secret. Distilling alcohol in the Middle Ages is still new, mostly practiced in monasteries and apothecaries, but every now and then some ambitious brewer makes an aqua vitae, or water of life, which tastes like what fire feels like in your throat. You sip, you regret. Your vision sharpens and blurs at the same time. Then there's the weird stuff. A man at the next table has a clay pot with a lid. He removes it dramatically and reveals a sludgy grey liquid. "Turnip mead," he announces. Someone claps, someone else gags. You're offered a taste, you decline. He shrugs and downs it himself with the commitment of a martyr. There's even boozy broth, a warm soup-like drink laced with ale and herbs. You're told it's for the constitution. It smells like stew and beer had an argument and no one won. One sip and you understand why people in this era have a very casual relationship with digestion. In the far corner, someone's trying to make their own cocktail, mixing leftover dregs from several mugs into a tin cup and adding a pickled onion for flair. Alchemist's elixir, they call it. Guaranteed to either heal your soul or ruin your marriage. You learn very quickly that sketchy ingredients are just part of the deal. There's no labelling, no purity law, and certainly no concern about allergens. If you're allergic to ragweed or clover or manticore tears, well, good luck. You're drinking whatever survived fermentation and didn't grow fur in the barrel. That's not to say people are careless, they just have different standards. A brew might include animal bones for strength, or charred bread for colour, or even a splash of fish sauce for body. Spices are precious though, and if you taste cinnamon, someone probably pawned a family heirloom to afford it. You overhear a small debate at the table next to you. One man insists that adding sage wards off liver rot. Another claims nettle improves vision. A third insists that the secret is to leave a silver coin in the barrel overnight to kill off evil spirits. This quickly devolves into an argument about whether coins or leeches are more effective purifiers. You finish your mug before you find out who wins. The fringe theory of the night, that certain brews brewed on specific days, especially during a full moon or after a lunar eclipse, carry intentions. One man tells you in a voice lowered to a reverent whisper that he once drank a moon-fermented cider and couldn't stop speaking in riddles for 3 days. You're not sure if he's lying or if the cider's working right now. As the drinks keep flowing, so does the conversation. Less coherent now, more dreamlike. Someone tells you that their aunt once made a mead with spider legs and acorns to ward off melancholy. Another swears their grandfather used to test new brews by giving them to the dog first. If the dog danced, it was good. If the dog slept, it was strong. If the dog vanished, it were best left unnamed. You're somewhere between sleepy and vibrating. Your fingertips feel distant. Your tongue is doing its best impression of wool. But the room is warm, full of laughter and clinking mugs and the occasional burp that registers on a spiritual level. And still, someone slides another drink your way. Try this, they say. It's got cloves, apples, and a little something I can't pronounce. You raise the mug, knowing full well it might contain thyme, tar, or mild poison. You drink anyway, because if you're going to go down, it might as well be in a vat of bubbling mystery-stewed medieval madness. You're not sure if you're still seated, or if your body has simply fused with the bench. The sensation of your limbs has drifted into that warm, spongy realm where everything feels both distant and strangely tingly, like you're being slowly pickled from the inside out. The mug in your hand is now just a friendly shape, and the tavern has morphed into a swirling mass of flickering candlelight, overlapping conversations, and the ever-present sound of someone falling over. But amid this holy mess of humanity, something interesting starts to take shape. You begin to notice the details of who is in the room with you, not just their individual quirks, but their social layers, because medieval taverns are strange places where, against all odds, people from very different walks of life occasionally share the same bench, at least until someone spills something on someone's lap and ruins the whole illusion of civility. Take the man 2 seats down, for instance. His hands are rough, his nails blackened with soot, and his boots have clearly spent more time inside mud than out. But his belt is decent leather, and his wool cloak is the kind that says, "working man who makes decent coin." You figure he's a blacksmith. His shoulders certainly look like they could bend horseshoes into pretzels. He's deep in conversation with a woman whose clothes are plainer, patched and sun-faded, but clean. She's probably a field worker, you guess. though her speech carries that sharp rhythm of someone who knows how to barter, how to manage livestock, and how to tell a drunk to sit down and shut up using only 3 words. Across from them sits a knight, or something close to one. He's younger than you expected, face still half good boy under his scraggly beard, and clearly off-duty. His surcoat is stained with travel grime, and his sword leans against the wall, tied with a scrap of cloth to keep it from clattering to the ground. His boots are too nice for a peasant. He drinks slowly, watching the room with the sort of cautious detachment that says, "I've been trained to stab people, but I'm off the clock right now." What's fascinating is that no one's treating him like royalty. He's just another warm body in the corner. Sure, a few glances slide his way, some admiring, some calculating, but mostly people leave him alone. You realise that in this room, social class matters, but not always. The tavern is one of the few spaces where class boundaries stretch a little. Not disappear exactly, you're not going to find the lord of the manor arm wrestling a Thatcher, but stretch. The rich may drink in separate fancier rooms, sure, but sometimes even they find their way into common spaces when the mood or the wine hits right. And when they do, the rules shift. A merchant in a fur-lined cloak walks in next, blinking at the smoke and dodging a particularly aggressive chicken. He's clearly from the guild class, wealthier, better fed, and deeply uncomfortable with the whole situation. He orders wine, because of course he does, and when told there's only ale, he tries to haggle. Maud does not haggle. He pays double and gets the same stuff as everyone else. You kind of admire that. You hear a whispered joke from someone nearby. The merchant's coin is gold, but his liver's made of cheese. It gets a few chuckles. Then there's a miller, burly and flour-dusted, telling loud jokes that only half the room finds funny. His laugh is contagious, though, and before long he's bought drinks for his corner of the tavern and is performing an improvised jig that somehow includes 3 spoons and an alarming amount of thigh. In the very back, almost unnoticed, sits a man in a cloak that's too long, too dark, and too still. You don't know if he's noble or criminal or both. You don't ask. No one does. He's left alone, mostly. Everyone knows that some people pay for silence with heavy coin, and heavier consequences. Despite the mingling, there are still tells, little signs that social class hasn't gone entirely out the window. It's in the accents. The way some folks say mead versus med. It's in how people sit, how they hold their mugs, how confidently they move through the room. You watch as a group of Thatchers, burly and loud, shift subtly to give space when the young knight gets up to pass. Not because he asked, but because centuries of instinct told them to. But alcohol is the great equaliser. After enough mugs, people start to blur. Titles don't carry much weight when you're too drunk to say your own name. The merchant is singing now, badly but enthusiastically. The blacksmith has his arm around the field worker. The knight is arguing with the miller about the merits of oat ale versus barley ale. A debate that has apparently reached the pantomime phase. There's also the class of professional drinkers, regulars who've turned tavern-going into a lifestyle. One old man with no teeth but 5 tankards in front of him is humming a song no one else knows. Another woman, hair tied up in a scarf, has been quietly playing cards and slowly, methodically winning all the bread crusts at her table. These people aren't nobles or peasants or merchants. They're just part of the furniture now, woven into the walls like the smell of boiled onions. You learn from a man with a cider-stained beard that in some towns, guilds have their own taverns. Tailors have their tap rooms, tanners drink with their own kind. You don't want to mix sweat like that, he says, poking your shoulder for emphasis. But in places like this, a crossroads inn, a village hub, everyone ends up under the same smoky ceiling, if only for a few hours. That's not to say it's all kumbaya and hugs. Fights still break out. Resentments simmer. Someone throws a sharp look at the knight when he brags too loudly about a fox hunt. Someone else mumbles about taxes and guild corruption. But tonight, at least, the beer is thick enough to hold those tensions down at the bottom of the mug. You raise your own drink and catch the blacksmith's eye. He raises his back. There's a moment of mutual blurry understanding. You're from different worlds. But here, right now, you're just 2 people sharing bad ale, sticky benches, and a rapidly declining sense of balance. And really, isn't that what society's all about? The blacksmith beside you leans in, eyes glossy and breath thick with barley, and says in a tone just above a whisper, "Don't toast with your left hand." You blink, unsure if you heard him correctly, and he repeats it, slower this time, as if sharing an ancient and dangerous secret. Left hand, bad omen, never ends well. Then he taps your mug with his right, downs what's left in one gulp, and belches like a thunderclap from the heavens. No further explanation, no follow-up, just stares at the wall like he's remembering something that haunts him to this day. That's your introduction to tavern superstitions, a whole underworld of rules, taboos, rituals, and old wives' tales that cling to the rafters like smoke. They're rarely written down, always evolving, and entirely non-negotiable for the locals who believe in them. And whether you believe or not, you find yourself following them. Because once someone whispers that a spilled drink means someone will die unmarried, well, you're not taking chances. A woman across the room knocks her mug over, sending a puddle of weak cider across the table. The room goes quiet for a half-beat. She stares down at the liquid, then solemnly drops a copper coin into the spill and mutters, "There, paid the spirits." Then she calmly goes back to her conversation. You don't even question it. Turns out taverns are steeped in folklore, little rituals passed down through generations like heirlooms. You learn them gradually, like social instincts. If your mug cracks, don't drink from it. It means the devil's marked it. If someone toasts without making eye contact, they're hiding something. And under no circumstances should you drink from a mug left unattended for more than 3 minutes. Could be cursed, someone says, or could be full of spit. Honestly, both seem equally plausible. The belief in spirit interference is strong. People here don't just drink with friends, they drink with the dead. Some even pour a few drops from their first mug onto the floor before they sip. For those who can't join us, they say, it's part respect, part protection. The idea is simple. If you don't give the dead their due, they'll take their revenge. By souring your beer, muddling your luck, or worse, leading you to sing naked in the street until dawn. You're assured this has happened more than once. There are specific superstitions about what you drink too. Dark ale is for mourning, pale ale for new beginnings. Mead is said to attract love, especially if brewed during a full moon. And if your drink has bubbles that cling to the side of the mug, someone is talking about you behind your back. Probably your cousin. You always suspected her. Some superstitions are stranger. A man insists that you should never toast with a spoon in your pocket. You don't know why. Neither does he. It's just bad, he says, with the finality of someone who once did it and barely survived. Another claims that if you drink the last sip in your mug too slowly, it invites a demon into your dreams. You take a long, decisive gulp and nod politely. You also learn about drunken omens. Hiccups mean you've been cursed. Sudden sneezing during a toast means someone you love is in danger. If a fly lands in your mug, it's good luck, unless the fly drowns. Then it's very bad luck, and you're advised to leave the tavern immediately and spend the night in a church pew. A woman with bright eyes and calloused fingers explains that you must never clink mugs across a threshold. Drinks shared between rooms invite division. You're not sure what that means, but when she offers a toast, you step all the way into the room first. She nods, approving. Another tavern-goer, older, smelling like damp hay and cinnamon, leans in and shares a particularly odd piece of advice. If your mug handle breaks off while drinking, your next child will be born with sharp teeth. You're not planning on having children tonight, or ever, but you clutch your mug a little tighter just in case. Even the layout of the tavern is said to have meaning. Sitting with your back to the door, unlucky. Drinking under a beam, neutral. Sitting directly across from the hearth, excellent, though it may make you fall in love, temporarily, with the first person who hands you a refill. You scoff, but when a stranger brings you a fresh mug and winks, you feel your stomach flutter. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe the beer's just strong enough now to count as a relationship. As the night creeps along and more mugs are emptied than refilled, these superstitions start to feel less like quaint beliefs and more like tavern lore. You hear of travellers who ignored the rules, like the man who lit a candle with the wrong hand and woke up in a ditch with a chicken tied to his belt, or the woman who refused to toast St. Bridget's name and had sour ale for 6 years straight. And speaking of saints, the tavern is littered with half-religious charms. St. Arnold, patron of brewers, gets mentioned often. His image hangs above the hearth in smudged paint, holding a mug and a staff. Keeps the ale from turning, someone mutters, and the barmaids from stabbing each other. There are whispers about magic brews, ones that only work if blessed under certain stars or stirred counterclockwise while reciting a protection verse. Some people believe certain drinkers can taste bad luck in their ale. They are called bitter tongues, and no one will drink after them. You spot one such man, pointed out by a cluster of whispering farmers, and notice that he drinks alone. every night, no exceptions. The more you listen, the more you realise these superstitions serve a purpose. In a world where science is more idea than reality, people use belief to make sense of what happens in the bottom of their mugs, why someone gets sick, why a batch spoils, why your best friend turns into a dancing fool every time the fiddler plays that one cursed song about the miller's daughter. It's not just fear, it's meaning-making, a way to navigate the chaos of booze, bad luck and unpredictable company. And as someone nearby spills their drink and everyone else instinctively spits over their shoulder, once for luck, twice for safety, 3 times to ward off goats, you find yourself doing the same. Because in this tavern, superstition isn't silly, it's survival. There's a knock at the door, 3 sharp raps that silence the room like a needle scratching across a lute string. It's not dramatic, not even loud, but something in the rhythm puts the entire tavern on pause. A few heads turn, one man stiffens, another quietly moves his mug closer to his chest. Even Maud, who hasn't flinched once all night, wipes her hands on her apron and mutters, "That'll be the taster." Moments later, the door creaks open, and a stout man steps inside. He's not impressive at first glance, round belly, rounder face, and eyes half-lidded, like he's perpetually unimpressed by everything in existence. But slung over his shoulder is a short staff marked with black notches, and dangling from his belt is a battered pewter spoon. The room parts for him the way a field does for a plough. He's the ale taster, and in this world, that means he's half health inspector, half executioner of bad brewing dreams. He makes his way through the room with casual authority, stopping at barrels like a priest checking the pews for sin. At each one, he ladles out a sample into his wooden bowl, sniffs deeply, swirls it and takes a sip. It's not a performance, it's a judgment. You watch his face for reactions like it's a poker game. A twitch of the nose, a pause between swirls. Every move means something. The brewer's fate may rest in how long he holds that first sip. Maud watches from behind the bar, arms folded. She's not smiling. You get the impression she's seen tasters come and go, some fair, some crooked, but none capable of cowing her. Still, this matters. If her ale's judged subpar, she could be fined. If it's unsafe, sour, spoiled or lethal, she could lose her right to brew altogether. And in this town that might as well be exile. The ale taster samples 3 barrels before turning to the one closest to your table, the one you're currently halfway through. He dips his spoon, sniffs once, then twice. His brow furrows. He sips. His mouth works silently. Then he nods. Approval. Quiet, unceremonious, but firm. Maud lets out a breath through her nose and returns to wiping mugs with exaggerated calm. Around you, the tension in the air slowly releases, like steam from a cracked lid. People resume talking. The fiddler picks up where he left off. You glance down at your drink and wonder what might have happened if that sip had gone the other way. See, in medieval England and much of Europe, local ale tasters, or ale conners, were part of a larger system of community enforcement. Brewing was serious business, both economically and biologically. A bad batch of ale could sicken a village. A weak one could invite accusations of cheating. So towns appointed tasters to inspect, evaluate and theoretically ensure quality. They weren't always experts, but they had authority, and more importantly a literal taste for corruption if they were so inclined. The joke goes, an honest ale connor's as rare as a clean chamber pot. You suspect this particular one falls somewhere in the middle, gruff but fair. He sits down near the fire now, ladle still damp, and accepts a mug from someone with a wink and a grunt. Whether he paid for it is unclear, probably not. You hear whispers of what happened last month, when a nearby tavern was found watering down its ale with ditch runoff. The taster slapped them with a hefty fine, and publicly declared the brewer a man of weak barley and weaker morals. He also, for dramatic effect, spat the sample onto the tavern floor and refused to let anyone mop it up for a week. Let it remind them, he'd said, before storming out in a cloud of self-importance and ale vapour. But tasters aren't just about taste. They're tied to a whole framework of local ale laws, regulations passed down by borough councils, guilds, and sometimes just made up by whoever's loudest at the town meeting. You can't brew too strong without a licence. You can't sell ale that's too weak, too warm or too cloudy, unless you're in a village where cloudiness is considered a sign of freshness, in which case clarity is a crime. It's confusing, it's contradictory, and it's absolutely enforced with the kind of zeal usually reserved for religious doctrine or sheep theft. That's why ale barrels are often marked with chalk symbols. A crude star for strong, a line for weak. A symbol resembling a coiled snake for don't ask, just drink. If the ale taster finds a mismatch between symbol and strength, you could lose more than your reputation. You could lose your livelihood. One table over, a man in a brewer's apron tells a story about a taster who demanded that every new barrel be blessed with a chant. Said it helped his digestion, the man snorts. What it helped was his ability to drink 20 mugs and still walk home. You also hear that some tasters carry small slivers of silver or lead, which they dip into the ale to detect poisonous herbs or dodgy additives. If the metal tarnishes, the ale's condemned. You look at your own mug and briefly wonder how many untested brews have passed your lips tonight. Too late now, but not all brewers fear the taster. Some court his favour, gifts, flattery, free drinks for his travelling companions. If he likes your ale, he might spread the word to pilgrims, merchants, even the local reeve. That means more traffic, more coin and more power. Ale isn't just a drink, it's a status symbol, a currency of taste and trust. The taster now snores softly by the fire, a dribble of ale glistening in his beard. Someone covers him with a dog blanket. He's done his rounds. Justice, such as it is, has been served. You think back on how different this is from modern inspections. No lab coats, no clipboards, no safety certifications, just a man, a spoonball, and the weight of local tradition. But somehow it works. Or at least it doesn't collapse into total disaster more often than it already does. And as you sip what remains in your mug, a rich, earthy brew with a hint of something herbal, you find yourself grateful for the brief reassurance that someone, somewhere, has tasted this and said, yes, this won't kill you, probably. It's not exactly a glowing Yelp review, but it's enough. You wake up with a dried pea stuck to your cheek, your tongue feeling like it's been used to clean old boots, and a vague recollection of singing a duet with someone's goose. The tavern is quieter now, but not asleep. A few fires still crackle, a couple of diehards are snoring under tables. Someone's softly playing a melody on a broken harp, which sounds mostly like distant weeping. And you're discovering what it means to have a medieval hangover. There's no aspirin here, no vitamin water, no greasy diner breakfast where the server calls you honey and pretends not to judge. There's just you, your dried pea, the remains of stale bread on a plate beside you, and the overwhelming sensation that your skull has been borrowed, dented and poorly reassembled. You sit up slowly, very slowly, your back protests. Your joints feel medieval in the worst sense. Your brain is a small, unhappy bird flapping around behind your eyes. And worst of all, someone nearby is chewing loudly. On purpose. With open mouth movements like a cow who's never heard of manners. It's enough to make you question every decision you've ever made, starting with stepping into this tavern. Hangovers in the Middle Ages aren't considered abnormal or even particularly concerning. They're just part of the natural consequence cycle. You drink, you wake up miserable, you blame the moon, your neighbour, or perhaps a hex, and then you do it all again the next night. You try to stand, your knees disagree, you remain seated. Someone notices your struggle and slides over a mug of something warm and thick. Morning broth, they grunt. It's brownish, smells of turnip and sorrow, and has a thin, oily sheen across the top. You take a tentative sip. It tastes like water that's argued with meat but didn't quite win. Still, it warms your belly and helps your stomach decide not to eject itself from your body just yet. In medieval taverns, hangover cures are equal parts superstition, guesswork, and sheer desperation. One man swears by raw eggs in sour ale. Another recommends chewing on dried mint leaves while chanting a hymn backward. A woman with extremely focused eyes insists that rubbing a dead mole against your temple will chase away the drink demon. You smile politely and turn down her offer of a spare mole. The most common remedy? More ale. Hair of the dog, they call it. But here, it's less a folk saying and more a survival tactic. Many patrons don't so much recover from drinking as glide seamlessly from last night's buzz into this morning's redrunk. You spot a man who's been unconscious for at least an hour, suddenly rise like a creaky zombie, grab a jug, take a deep swig and sit back down with a satisfied grunt. His wife, seated beside him, continues knitting like this is entirely normal. You get up and stumble toward the hearth, hoping heat will bring clarity. Instead, you step in something that squelches and squishes. You freeze. You don't look down, you move on. You pass a man holding his head and whispering prayers. He opens one eye and says, "Too many jugs, not enough saints." You nod like this is deeply profound. Maybe it is, maybe everything is in this state. The barmaid, now much less amused than she was last night, is dragging buckets of water across the floor and occasionally slapping a mop at something unmentionable. She glares at the passed-out friar in the corner and mutters something about pious pigs. No one corrects her. You ask about remedies. She snorts. Sleep, bread, and if you can find one, an honest apothecary. She tosses you a small loaf that's hard enough to double as a weapon. You nibble at it anyway, wondering if medieval dentistry was just praying the bread softened before your teeth cracked. An old woman seated near the fire claims she has a cure-all tonic. She pulls out a flask and tells you it's made of rosemary, vinegar, boiled garlic, and a dash of crushed oyster shell. You take one whiff and nearly pass out again. She grins and drinks it herself without flinching. You begin to suspect she's immortal. You spot a younger lad trying to impress a cluster of listeners with his own hangover cure. Let a chicken peck your toes while you hum a drinking song. One man asks, deadpan, which song? They argue for 10 minutes. The chicken in question waddles by and pecks the lad on the ankle unprompted. He declares it a sign and vomits into a bucket. Not all cures are gross. Some are just weirdly hopeful. A man whispers that drinking ale brewed under a waxing crescent moon can reverse any hangover. Another says sleeping with a clove of garlic under your tongue ensures dreams of clarity and waking without pain. A third recommends slapping your own face 10 times, then biting a coin. You try none of these, but someone behind you does all 3 in rapid succession and immediately walks into a post. Still, you do your best to reassemble yourself with the tools available. A half-empty mug, some sad bread, and a chair leg to lean on. You take slow sips of weak ale, watered down, lukewarm, but surprisingly helpful. Coats your mouth, soothes your throat, and reminds your body that hydration is technically a thing. After a few minutes, you can think in complete sentences again. Mostly. You learn that some taverns offer recovery breakfasts, stews, soft-boiled eggs, whatever's left from last night that hasn't sprouted legs. The theory is that warm food grounds the spirit and retethers the body. The practice is less poetic and more desperate chewing, while trying not to make eye contact with your reflection in the bottom of the mug. You catch a glimpse of yourself in a scratched piece of polished brass hanging on the wall. Your hair looks like a haystack that lost a fight. Your eyes resemble 2 pickled raisins floating in shame. You're pretty sure your breath could start a fire. You wink at your reflection. It doesn't wink back. You move on. Eventually the tavern starts to stir again. New patrons shuffle in. Early risers with coin and purpose. A man carrying turnips. A woman with a goose under one arm. They nod at the wreckage of the previous night without comment. This is normal. This is Tuesday. You somehow are still here. You down the last of your ale, take a deep breath, and feel just slightly more alive. The hangover isn't gone, but it's been wrestled into submission, like a very drunk dog that has agreed to lie down for a bit if you promise not to make loud noises. And you know, deep down, that you're probably going to do this all again. Eventually. You're still reassembling yourself when you notice her. She's carrying a tray, wooden, scratched, slanted slightly from one uneven leg, and overloaded with mugs, but she moves like she's balancing feathers. Her skirt is hiked up just enough to avoid the sticky patches on the rush-covered floor, and her eyes, sharp as a butcher's knife and twice as likely to make a man bleed, scan the room like she owns it, which in a way she probably does. Not on paper, maybe, but in practice, this is her territory. You've met your first medieval barmaid, and she is both queen and battlefield medic in equal measure. She passes your table and flashes a tired, maybe almost smile, and you feel something shift in your already alcohol-soaked soul. Maybe it's the ache of your hangover or the way she just expertly dodged a collapsing stool without spilling a single mug. But for a flickering moment, you're half in love, and you're not alone. Every other person in this tavern seems to have some kind of history with her. Actual, imagined, or wishfully intoxicated. A merchant tries to compliment her by comparing her to a well-fed goose. She doesn't break stride. A shepherd offers her a half-rotted apple as a token. She takes it, sniffs it, and tosses it into the fire without missing a beat. A friar, maybe the same one from last night, proposes marriage in slurred Latin. She pats his head like a child and moves on. The thing is, romance in the medieval tavern is less Shakespeare and more sweaty pickup lines shouted over a plate of beans. And yet, in this dim, smoky world where everyone smells like damp wool and pickled onions, people still try. Maybe it's the drink, maybe it's the way dim lighting hides most sins, Maybe it's because in a world with so little softness, any gesture of affection feels like gold. You overhear a lad trying to charm a barmaid with a riddle about an ox and a pear tree. He messes up the punchline and ends with, "And that's why I have no shoes." She just walks away. You sympathise. Someone nearby offers advice. You want her heart? Compliment her ladle. No one ever does. You write that down in your head, just in case. Of course, not all tavern love is about the barmaids. You spot a pair of farmers entwined at a side table, giggling into their mugs, smearing gravy onto each other's sleeves. A young woman and a travelling minstrel are holding hands under the table like schoolchildren caught in a sin. At one point, a man loudly declares his undying devotion to someone named Beatrice, then promptly throws up on his own boots. Love, as always, is complicated. The truth is, taverns are one of the few social spaces where flirting is allowed, even encouraged, so long as it doesn't tip into violence or theft. In a world of arranged marriages, rigid class roles, and few opportunities to mingle outside your station, a shared mug and a crooked smile across a sticky table might be the closest thing to freedom. You hear of matches made in taverns. A smith and a baker's apprentice who met during a bar brawl and ended up married, scarred and deliriously happy. A pair of brewers who discovered a shared love of bog myrtle and named their firstborn after a particularly potent batch. But you also hear of quick flings and forgotten names, of tavern pregnancies that spark whispered debates about paternity and sudden, strategic trips to other villages. A man near you is loudly declaring that a tavern kiss don't count unless it's after the third mug, and the woman beside him nods solemnly, like this is church doctrine. Another woman says she met her fourth husband in a place just like this. "He offered me stew," she says. "I said yes. Then I said yes to him." Everyone laughs. She winks. It's unclear if the story's true. Doesn't matter. It's perfect. Then there's the other side, the lonely drinkers nursing their mugs and watching the couples with a mix of longing and resignation. You spot one, his tunic worn thin at the elbows, staring into the foam like it owes him an apology. Someone asks if he's waiting for someone. "Just time," he says, and takes another sip. You feel a tap on your shoulder. It's her, the barmaid from earlier. She's handing you another mug, though you're pretty sure you didn't order it. "From the man in the corner," she says, nodding, toward a figure with a scar over one eye who raises his mug in greeting. You toast him cautiously, or... She smirks. "Don't worry. He's got a wife. Just likes giving strangers ale. Says it improves karma." You sip. It's decent, warm, a little fruity. You realise you're watching her again and quickly pretend to be very interested in the crumbs on your table. She notices anyway. "Don't fall in love in a tavern," she says over her shoulder as she moves on. "The morning's always uglier than the night promised." Words to live by. But despite the warning, people do fall in love in taverns, or something that feels like love at least. They share stories, secrets, songs. They make promises with ale-soaked breath and crossed fingers. They forget names and remember eyes. And sometimes, just sometimes, it lasts. You hear tales of courtships born over spilled mugs and shared hangovers, of lords marrying commoners they met in roadside inns, of nobles who ran away with barmaids, choosing love over land. The romantic in you wants to believe those stories. The realist notes that those stories often end in exile, scandal, or very swift annulment. Still, you can't help but feel the charm of it all. The crackling fire, the shared warmth, the stolen glances through mug steam and half-drunken haze. The fact that for one night, in this little bubble of warmth and music, you're not alone. You're part of the strange boozy pulse of medieval life. And maybe, just maybe, if you don't screw it up, she'll remember your name tomorrow. Or at least your face, or at least that you didn't vomit on the floor. And really, in a place like this, that's as good a start as any. Sometime around what must be the deepest part of the night, when the fire has burned low and the air in the tavern feels like soup made of sweat and barley, you feel a tap on your shoulder. It's not the gentle kind, it's the kind that says, you're about to be involved in something you definitely don't want to be involved in. You turn slowly and find two grim-faced men standing behind you, both of them holding wooden poles with iron loops on the ends. One is chewing a root, the other is already frowning in your general direction. "You there," says the frowner. "We've had reports of loud singing, public wobbling, and disgraceful use of a chamber pot." You blink. You try to blink again, just in case it helps. "I don't think that was me," you offer weakly. "I'm barely able to hum." He squints at you. You're wearing one boot and holding a ladle. You look down, you are in fact wearing one boot and holding what appears to be someone's soup ladle. You have no memory of either decision. Thus begins your brief but unforgettable brush with medieval public shaming. The men are part of the watch, not quite police, not quite bouncers, but somewhere in between. Towns and villages assign these men to keep public order, especially around places that naturally spawn disorder. Places like this tavern. Their authority is a mix of actual law and just enough muscle to make people listen. They grab you gently but firmly under the arms and begin hauling you upright. "To the pillory with this one," says the root chewer. "He looks too cheerful." You protest, but it's too late. The tavern watches with vague interest. One man offers you a piece of bread. Another raises a mug and says, "You'll be fine. I spent 2 nights in the stocks for hiccuping at a nun." They drag you toward the back door, half in jest, half with real authority. Outside, the air hits you like cold soup. It's damp, it's dark, and the only light comes from a distant lantern and the faint glow of moonlight behind low clouds. You stumble forward on one boot. They lead you to a row of wooden posts along the tavern's rear wall, each fitted with iron shackles and stained from years of similar nights. You don't see a full pillory, thankfully, but what you do see is the drunk tank medieval style, a bench chained to a wall covered poorly with straw. They call it the drunkard's seat, also known locally as the perch, the idiot's bench, or more creatively, the fool's roost. You're pushed down onto it with a theatrical flourish and given a leather strap to hug in case the earth spins too fast. "You'll sit here," says Frowner, "until you can walk Cerise and walk straight or deny everything convincingly." They chuckle and walk away. "Congratulations, you've been publicly shamed, mildly." Medieval society has a long history of dealing with the inebriated and disorderly. Depending on the town and the severity of your behaviour, punishments range from gentle nudging to very uncomfortable wooden devices. There's the cucking stool, a chair dunked into cold water, mostly reserved for scolds and public nuisances. There's the drunkard's cloak, a barrel with holes cut for arms and legs, worn like a shaming costume as you're paraded around the square. Then, of course, the stocks, where your ankles or wrists, or both, are locked in place for all to see, usually with someone's leftover onion thrown at your face. Thankfully, your offence seems to be on the mild side of disgrace. You hear one of the watchmen murmur, "He's barely talking to ghosts, he'll sleep it off." You sit in the straw hugging your ladle, one boot on and the other somewhere in the world. The night air is sobering, not in a philosophical, life-changing way, just literally. It's cold and you start to feel each ache from your bones, each bruise from the bench, and each shameful inch of last night's mistakes creeping back into memory. Someone throws a blanket over you. You look up and it's the barmaid. Of course it is. "You were singing about turnips," she says, very earnestly. You groan. She drops a crust of bread in your lap. "Better than last week," she adds. "Last week someone tried to baptise the cat." She leaves before you can reply. You pick at the bread and look around. You're not the only one here. Down the row, another man snores loudly into a hay bale. A woman rests her head on her knees, muttering what sounds like a very specific curse aimed at someone named Gregory. A third figure, half covered in an old cloak, simply rocks back and forth, whispering a song that might have once been a lullaby or a threat. Hard to say. You realise the bench isn't about punishment, it's about containment, a way to stop the party before it tips into chaos. If someone goes too far, they're pulled out, made an example of, and given a place to sit and think. Whether they actually think is another matter. For some it's just a pause, for others it's humiliation. If your friends walk by and see you, expect to hear about it for weeks. If your enemies walk by, well, hope you weren't wearing your nicest tunic. There's a story going around the tavern, someone tells it every week, about the time a local reeve got so drunk he arrested himself. Locked himself in the stocks, lost the key and had to bribe a passing sheep herder to set him free. Justice, they call it. Ugly and symmetrical. You think about that as you chew your stale bread and fight sleep. Somewhere behind the tavern, the goat bleats mournfully. You consider bleating back. You don't. Eventually the tavern door creaks open. Frowner returns, checks your eyes, nods once. "Less wobble in the pupils," he says. "You'll live." He unlatches the chain and helps you up. You wobble. He doesn't notice. Inside, the warmth hits you again, muggy, smoky and full of noise. You limp back to your bench and settle in, ladle still in hand. No one mocks you, no one even mentions it, because in the tavern, everyone ends up on the bench eventually. It's just a matter of time. The fire is low again, sputtering now and then like it's had enough of this night and everyone in it. You're slouched deep into your bench, still warm from your brief exile outside, nursing your third, I swear this is my last one mug, when the tavern door swings open with a gust of night air and a whole lot of noise. A group stumbles in, trailing laughter and perfume and something that smells suspiciously like boiled lavender. You don't even need to guess. They're nobles. Or at least noble adjacent, which is sometimes worse. The kind of people who don't so much walk into a tavern as arrive in it. They sweep in like they expect trumpets, shedding cloaks and gloves and pretences in equal measure. You can tell instantly who they are by the fabrics. Soft, colourful, stitched where yours is frayed, layered where yours is patched. One wears a doublet so fine it probably costs more than this entire tavern's annual barley supply. Another's shoes are pointed so sharply they could injure livestock. Everyone in the room clocks them. Conversations pause just slightly. Mugs lower, eyes narrow or widen depending on who's thinking. Ah, coin and who's thinking. Ah, trouble. Maud lifts her chin slightly but says nothing. She knows this game. Nobles don't usually drink with commoners. That's what private parlours and well-stocked wine cellars are for. But every now and then, during festivals, hunting, trips, or on a dare, they step down from their velvet towers and slum it with the barley-stained masses, sometimes for fun, sometimes out of rebellion, sometimes just to watch people flinch. This group looks like they're here for fun, but the kind of fun that costs someone else their teeth. They immediately commandeer a large table near the hearth, brushing aside a sleeping woodcutter without so much as an apology. One of them kicks over a stool and laughs. Another tosses a few coins on the table like breadcrumbs to peasants. The message is clear. We're here, we're rich, and we expect to be entertained. Drinks are ordered, wine naturally, even though you know the tavern's wine stock is basically just red, redder, and danger. One noble insists on claret from Gascony, which causes Maud to arch an eyebrow so high it nearly detaches from her forehead. She vanishes into the back and returns with something vaguely purplish in a chipped jug. The noble drinks it, coughs violently, and declares it full-bodied. His friends cheer. Then the music starts. One of the nobles, lean, absurdly blonde, and clearly used to being the centre of any room, pulls a lute from nowhere, strums a few lazy chords, and begins to sing. It's a hunting song, full of dogs and horns and the occasional metaphor about swans that probably isn't appropriate. His voice isn't bad, but his smugness is louder. The table claps along, more interested in his jawline than his talent. A few locals try to join in. They hum, they raise their mugs, they nod. But there's a tension in the air, the kind that always arrives when power meets ale. The nobles don't mind the company, until they do, and when they do, things get messy. One man, likely a farmhand judging by the mud-caked tunic and the hands like cracked leather, makes the mistake of laughing a little too hard at a noble's joke. Not at him, just near him. The noble turns, smiles thinly, and dumps the rest of his wine into the man's lap. "Oops," he says, not sounding sorry. The room freezes. The farmhand stares down at his lap, then up at the man who just wine-baptized him. He looks like he's deciding whether to punch him or cry. In the end, he does neither. He stands, nods once, and walks out. No one stops him. The door closes softly behind him, a quiet punctuation mark in a room full of unspoken sentences. You feel something shift in your chest. That was ugly. That was normal. Because when nobles party too hard, they don't just risk their own dignity. They throw elbows at everyone else's. They can afford to act like fools. Their hangovers come with feather pillows and forgiving scribes. Yours come with a boot to the ribs and maybe a fine for disturbing the peace. Still, the room starts to ease back into its rhythm. A few jokes are cracked. The local fiddler picks up a tune again, something loud and fast enough to drown out the sour taste left by the wine stunt. You sip your ale and watch the noble table. One of them has now climbed onto the bench and is attempting to dance. It's not going well. He sways, stumbles, and narrowly avoids the fire. He throws his arms out and shouts something in French. No one answers. He looks offended by the silence. Then slowly he starts to wobble. You can see it coming. His face changes. He turns pale. He covers his mouth, sways forward, then vomits into his own goblet. He holds it there for a second, as if unsure what just happened, then sets it gently on the table like a gift. Everyone nearby scoots away. One woman giggles, another man claps. because apparently noble etiquette stops at digestion. No one removes the goblet, it just sits there, glowing with warning. Eventually the noble leans back, sighs heavily, and begins to snore with impressive volume. His friends step around him like furniture. One tries to sketch something rude on his forehead with soot. Another steals his coin pouch. No one intervenes. Maud walks over, takes the goblet with 2 fingers, dumps it into a bucket, and walks away without breaking stride. Because this isn't her first noble disaster. You learn that some taverns ban nobles outright. Others give them a private room, far from the common drinkers. But this one just waits them out. Eventually they'll pass out, wander off, or get bored. The common folk will sweep up the coins, the shame and the spilled wine, and things will return to normal. Until the next one arrives. As you finish your drink, you glance around at the tavern. The faces worn with hard lives, the quiet laughter, the calloused hands around mugs. You raise your ale to no one in particular, then drink deeply, savouring the warm, honest burn of barley and bitterness. And you think, not for the first time tonight, I'd rather be a peasant with beer than a noble with a goblet full of puke. You've just watched a noble vomit into his own goblet, and fall asleep with the serene expression of a man who's convinced no one will ever hold him accountable. The tavern has absorbed the moment with the sort of resignation that only comes from centuries of witnessing the exact same thing happen over and over again. And just when you think it's safe to relax, someone at a nearby table slams their hand down and shouts, "Court is in session." A cheer erupts, and before you can even question what's happening, a large stool is dragged into the centre of the room and ceremoniously declared the throne of justice. Welcome to Drunk Court, a beloved, unofficial tradition where the ale flows like logic, the laws are made up on the spot, and everyone is somehow both guilty and not sober enough to care. The judge is a butcher with a stained apron, 1 tooth, and a surprisingly regal bearing. He bangs a wooden spoon against an empty jug and bellows, "Bring forth the accused!" A murmur rises as names are shouted from every corner. Tom for spilling the gravy, Elsie for taking 2 turns at the dice, Gerald for being suspiciously quiet. The names come fast, the crimes come faster, and then someone calls out, "The Traveller." You look up. You are the Traveller. Suddenly you're on your feet, being herded toward the stool by a half-dozen cheering patrons who are far too invested in this spontaneous kangaroo court. Someone tosses a cabbage in your direction as a sign of their encouragement or maybe ridicule. You sit down and glance around helplessly. There's no real escape, not unless you plan to crawl under a table and chew your way through the wall like a particularly desperate badger. The butcher judge squints at you. You stand accused of excessive blinking, awkward posture, and he sniffs the air theatrically. Abuse of fermented grain. How do you plead? "Drunk," you say honestly. "Guilty," the room roars. The trial begins. A prosecutor steps forward. A woman in a flower-covered dress with wild hair and a grin that could curdle cream. She begins listing off invented crimes with the flair of a street performer. "He drank more than he paid. He took the last piece of bread. He winked at the barmaid and she didn't wink back." You open your mouth to protest. She interrupts with, "Objection!" The judge overrules. You're not sure how that works, but you go along with it. Then comes your defence, assigned on the spot. A drunk man named Walter, who has no idea who you are and can't pronounce your name, but is very confident in your innocence. "This fine, human," he declares, gesturing broadly in your direction, "has harmed no one, except maybe that goat outside, and that was consensual." Everyone nods solemnly. You hope he's joking. As absurd as it seems, this whole performance is strangely coherent. Mock trials like this are an old tavern tradition in many parts of medieval Europe. An improvised social court that keeps the mood light and gives people a chance to poke fun at each other without resorting to fists. Instead of punishment, there's laughter. Instead of verdicts, there are toasts. Unless you lose badly. Your witnesses are brought forward, mostly people who claim you spilled something on them, looked at them funny, or stole their seat. One man swears you sang off key, another accuses you of smiling like you're up to something. The judge considers these testimonies while sipping from a large mug labelled "Court Evidence." Then the jury is consulted. A random group of 6, all visibly inebriated, cast their votes by tossing bits of bread into a bowl, crust up for innocent, crust down for guilty. There are no rules to this, just ritual. The verdict, guilty. Of course. The punishment? Dramatic death. A cheer goes up as the judge reaches behind the bar and produces a wooden sword. You're instructed to stand, place one hand over your heart, and look very sorry. The prosecutor raises a mug and says, "May this be a lesson to all who drink without honour." The judge raises the sword, sways a little, and then gently taps you on the shoulder with it 3 times before yelling, "Slain!" You fall to the floor as dramatically as you can manage without vomiting. Someone throws a cloak over you. The tavern bursts into applause. A minute later, you're back on your bench, handed a fresh mug, and now referred to as the Resurrected. Your trial is over. Court continues with new victims. A woman is accused of dancing with 3 people in one song. A man is brought up for snoring mid-toast. Another is charged with mug-hogging. As silly as it seems, this ritual serves a purpose. In a place with no central entertainment, Drunk Court is pure theatre. It's community bonding disguised as law. It lets people laugh at themselves, settle petty grievances, and mock authority in a way that feels both safe and satisfying. Even the tavern staff seems relieved by the break from real arguments and the more dangerous kind of brawling. Sometimes actual justice gets tangled in the nonsense. You hear about a tavern up north where the local reeve used mock trials to gauge up whether people were harbouring grudges. Another story tells of a landless knight who was once convicted of being too handsome and ordered to give a kiss to every woman in the tavern. He died smiling, someone claims. No one questions it. And every now and then someone takes it too seriously. You catch a sharp exchange between 2 men when one is found guilty of treasonous whistling. Apparently it wasn't a joke to him. Maud appears just in time, slams a jug on the table and declares the verdict void due to excessive whining. A new trial starts 5 minutes later, with a dog as the defendant. No one objects, the dog wins. As the night deepens and the mock trials wind down, you sip your ale and realise something remarkable. Drunk Court works. It keeps the peace, it diffuses tension, and it gives everyone a role to play, even if that role is witness to the crime of having an ugly hat. You survived your sentence with your dignity mostly intact, and in this tavern, that makes you practically nobility. You're halfway through another mug, one that tastes vaguely of pine needles and regret, when a man sits beside you who is clearly unmistakably trouble. His boots are too quiet, his cloak too nondescript, and his eyes scan the room like he's cataloguing weaknesses. He doesn't introduce himself. He doesn't need to. The tavern, suddenly a little colder, seems to acknowledge him with a collective flinch. Even Maud, who fears neither gods nor rats, pauses for just a beat before sliding him a mug without being asked. You found yourself sitting next to an outlaw, or at least someone who plays the part very convincingly. He sips, watches, and finally mutters, "You've got the look of someone new to the wrong side of a good night." You give him a weak smile and nod, just passing through. "That's what they all say," he says, with the faintest smile of someone who's heard it from both travellers and bounty hunters. Around you, the tavern hums like nothing's changed, but there's a subtle shift in posture now, back straighter, laughter just a little forced, because everyone knows that sometimes these taverns host more than tired farmers and thirsty pilgrims. Sometimes they play safe house to people on the run, bandits, deserters, smugglers, and all the other shades of grey that medieval justice doesn't make room for. And then there are the unlicensed taverns, those little side-room speakeasies tucked into alleys or basements, serving unregulated ale to people who don't want questions and certainly aren't answering any. This place might be legal, but you're starting to think it's got a soft spot for legal-adjacent activities. The man beside you gestures with his mug. "You ever drink in a cellar with no stairs?" You squint. "That's not a thing." "Oh, it's a thing. You jump in, you drink, and you climb out when you can still feel your knees. If you can't, well, someone usually checks in the morning." It's hard to tell if he's joking. It's also hard to tell if your drink is strong enough to make that story sound reasonable. Probably both. He tells you about the black ale dens, unofficial drinking holes hidden behind false walls, accessible only through bribes, passwords, or sheer bad luck. They serve anything from Groot to grain alcohol that could strip paint off a reliquary. "Had a drink once that made me see music," he says. "Bright green, tasted like pine tea to bees." You laugh nervously. He doesn't. In these unlicensed places, there are no ale tasters, no monks, no rules, just coin, drink, and the understanding that if someone collapses, you roll them into the corner and keep pouring. And while you might get a stronger brew or a faster buzz, You're also playing hopscotch with poisoning, robbery, and the occasional, oops, we thought you were someone else moment. They're not all bad, the man says, almost defensively. Some are just run by folks who can't afford the taxes, or got banned for no good reason. He shrugs. Maybe their ale was too good? You raise an eyebrow. Is that possible? He leans in slightly. Anything's possible when the Lord's cousin has a brewing license and you don't. It's a reminder that beneath the warm surface of tavern culture lies a very medieval truth. Control equals power. And that includes control over who gets to sell alcohol and where. Brewing licenses are handed out not always to the best, but to the best connected. So if your brew is popular but your politics are poor, you might find yourself unofficial real fast. And that means you either shut down or go underground. Some of the most famous outlaw dens are built in places no one would think to check. Abandoned mills, ruined chapels, even forest clearings marked only by certain trees tied with cloth. You hear of one that floats on a barge down the river, never docking in the same place twice. They call it the Drunken Duck, someone says. No sign, you follow the smell. Of course, these places attract a different crowd, not just bandits and smugglers, but poets, prophets, gamblers, and the eternally curious. Some go just to say they've been. Others go because they need to, because they've been banned from every official establishment for debts, heresy, or just being too loud after curfew. The man beside you leans back and watches the fire flicker. You know what I like about the outlaw dens, he says. Nobody pretends. You nod slowly. There's a kind of truth to that. In the regular tavern, people still perform, still try to play the part of the good neighbour, the hard worker, the loyal servant. But in the outlaw den, the masks come off. You are what you are. And if what you are is desperate, dangerous, or deeply weird, well, that's your business. Still, it's not without danger. You hear stories. A man poisoned by ale laced with bitter herbs meant to mimic hops, but pulled from the wrong bush. A brewer who vanished after a noble tried to buy his recipe, and he refused. A whole den that was burned down in the night after a visiting friar overheard the wrong joke about the bishop. Yet despite the risk, these places thrive, because they offer something the official taverns don't. Freedom, even if it's smoky and sketchy and smells like fermented turnip socks. Back at your table, someone's telling a story about the time they stumbled into a barn thinking it was an inn, and ended up drinking with actual highwaymen. Nice fellows, he insists. Terrible hygiene, but generous. The man next to you finishes his mug and stands. If you ever want to find one, he says, ask for the place where the door's always locked but everyone's inside. He walks away before you can ask what that even means. You watch him disappear into the darkness beyond the hearth's light and wonder if he's headed for one of those outlaw places right now. One of those shadowy corners of the world where coin speaks louder than law and the drink flows until memory stops. And part of you wants to follow. Not because you think it's wise, but because, let's be honest, you've already made worse decisions tonight. The tavern quiets for just a moment, brief like the pause between thunderclaps when someone starts humming. It's soft at first, like an itch at the edge of your hearing. Then another voice joins in, then another, and before you know it, the room has picked up a rhythm so ancient and strangely familiar you're sure you've heard it before. Not here, not in this lifetime, but maybe somewhere, maybe everywhere. Bring us ale and bring it strong, we'll drink till the rooster forgets his song. You feel your mouth moving before your brain catches up. You're singing, everyone is. Even the people who barely know the words are faking it with such confidence that the lyrics don't matter anymore. This is no hymn, no polite court ballad. This is a drinking song, and its only purpose is to be loud, catchy, and impossible to sing without sloshing something. There's clapping now, stomping, the mug banging begins. People thumping the beat into the tables, the benches, the bones of the tavern itself. It's like the whole room becomes a drum, a single rhythm pounding out joy, defiance, and just enough chaos to keep the night interesting. Drinking songs are everywhere in the medieval world, but in taverns like this, they are the sacred texts of the inebriated. No one teaches them formally, you just absorb them. Hear them once, and they live in your blood forever. Some are bawdy, some are mournful, some sound like nonsense until you realise the third verse is about someone stealing a bishop's horse. The magic lies in their simplicity. Easy to learn, hard to forget, impossible not to join in once they start. Their choruses are built for shouting, not singing. Their melodies live in that sweet low stretch of the voice where everyone can participate. Old, young, tone-deaf or terrified. And the best part, most of them have survived for centuries. You're humming a tune that once echoed through the rafters of a tavern like this in 1392, then again in 1610, and again last week at a pub where someone spilled beer on your boots while screaming, "For England!" The words may shift, the names change, but the spirit remains. Here's to the brewer, blind but bold. He mixed the barley with dust and gold. The man next to you yells the wrong verse, but nobody cares. A woman a few tables over adds a harmony that is so off-key it makes your spine curl, but it's glorious. A stable boy claps in a way that suggests he's never clapped before in his life, but his grin is wide, and his cup is fuller than yours. Every region has its own songs, of course. Some are about love, some are about war. Many are about food, oddly enough. Sausages, bread, the miraculous properties of turnips are popular. Refrain is currently being belted out about a pig that drank ale and forgot how to walk straight. Like us, someone laughs. You join in despite knowing only every third word. It doesn't matter. One man shouts that he knows a French tavern song, half the room boos, half the room cheers. He launches into it anyway. It's fast, has too many vowels, and it involves questionable gestures. But by the end of it, the entire room is chanting the last line like they were born doing it. Drinking songs carry history in their bones. They tell you who was fighting, who was hungry, who was in love, and who absolutely should not have been near livestock. Scholars have traced some back to Viking halls, Roman military camps, and ancient fertility festivals that probably ended in nudity and questionable herbal decisions. And here you are, in a medieval tavern, continuing the tradition. Your voice is hoarse, your mug is dangerously low, and someone near you is attempting to harmonise while standing on a stool that clearly doesn't support that level of confidence. They fall halfway through the chorus. Laughter erupts. The song doesn't stop. It never does. Then comes the one everyone's been waiting for. A hush falls, just for a second. A single voice starts the opening line. "Oh, roll the barrel down the hill." And immediately chaos. Everyone knows it. Everyone loves it. It's the medieval version of a greatest hit. A certified banger passed from tavern to tavern like sacred fire. It tells the tale of a travelling brewer, 3 barrels of ale, and one very amorous donkey. The details are fuzzy, possibly criminal, but the chorus is legendary. You belt it out like your life depends on it. Some people leap up, spinning each other in a lurching ale-fueled dance that knocks over 2 stools and one very surprised cat. Someone bangs a drum they didn't have 5 minutes ago. You think someone's playing the jawbone of an animal. It's unclear what species. Doesn't matter. It slaps. Songs like these are a release. A way to shout out what you can't say sober. A way to make noise together. Be together. Even if your only shared language is drink, drink, drink. No one is a stranger during the chorus. No one is unloved if they're clapping on the beat. Even the most standoffish noble from earlier is mouthing the words like he doesn't want anyone to see he knows them. And once the final verse is sung, the one about the donkey stealing the brewer's clothes and running off into the woods, the room erupts, cheers, foot stomps, tankards slam down like punctuation. Then silence, a breath, followed by someone shouting, "Again!" You laugh, raise your mug and take another sip of warm, slightly frothy barley magic. These songs won't be written in any great chronicles, they won't be performed in noble courts or carved into marble walls, but they will be passed down, over mugs, around fires, sung loudly and badly by generations who don't remember who wrote them, only how they make you feel, which is against all odds, alive. The echoes of that last raucous chorus still linger in your ears, half melody, half breathless wheezing, as the tavern settles into a quieter rhythm. Not quiet exactly, just conversational, like the high tide of chaos has receded and left behind small pools of chatter, each one bubbling with its own little world of gossip, banter and bragging. You tilt your mug back, find it mostly empty, and decide now's as good a time as any to listen in on what passes for news in this place. Because make no mistake, taverns are medieval newsrooms. No parchment, no printing press, no elegant calligraphy required. Just mouths, mugs, and an appetite for information that may or may not be true. At the table to your left, a man with a nose like a winter carrot is whispering urgently to a half-asleep blacksmith about a witch found outside the village. "She had a mark on her foot shaped like a duck," he says. "A duck?" the blacksmith grunts. "That's just gout." The man looks hurt. "Witches can have gout." Behind you, Two women are embroiled in a hot debate about whether the baker's new apprentice is actually a runaway nun. She says she came from the east, one insists, and she needs dough like it's a penance, the other shrugs. Or maybe she just hates bread. On the far side of the hearth, a group of travellers are holding court, swapping tales of far-off towns where the dead have started walking, or where pigs have been born with two heads and uncanny economic instincts. One man swears he met a talking goose. She charged a toll to cross the river, he says, and she bit my cousin when he tried to sneak by. You're not sure what's true, you're not even sure any of it is, but that's not the point. In a world where the fastest form of communication is a horse with a letter tucked in its saddlebag, taverns like this are how information travels, fast, messy, and wildly entertaining. You pick up snippets from all corners of the room: a war brewing in the north, a merchant ship sunk by the river pirates, a nobleman's daughter caught sneaking into a monastery, possibly dressed as a monk, depending on the version. Someone claims the king is dead. Someone else says he was just sleeping funny. A third insists the king died twice and came back with different eyebrows. It's a glorious mess. And the bartenders and barmaids? They know more than anyone. You ask Maud if she hears anything interesting. She snorts. That tinker over there's got 3 wives and none of them know about each other. One's in this room. You glance over at the tinker. He's playing dice with a man wearing a feather in his hat that might be alive. You don't ask which wife is nearby. You've had enough danger for one night. She goes on. A tax collector came through yesterday and didn't leave with all his toes. 2 nobles passed through last week and tried to buy my dog, and someone left a severed duck head under the table this morning. Still warm. You blink. Any idea who did it? Could have been ceremonial, she says casually, or just breakfast. The tavern's not just a news hub. It's also a rumour forge, a place where half-truths get hammered into ironclad facts with enough retellings. A simple merchant dispute becomes a scandal. A missing cart becomes a kidnapping. A loud sneeze from a stranger becomes the start of a plague. By the time news makes it to the next village, it's evolved beyond recognition. That's not a flaw, it's a feature. Because medieval life isn't just about surviving the elements and taxes, it's about surviving the boredom, and rumours are entertainment with just enough real-world seasoning to keep you coming back. Take the story being told at the next table. A man swears he watched a knight duel a bear. Not just any bears, he insists, a bear wearing a helmet. His companion shakes her head. That was no bear, that was Sir Bernard. He's just very hairy. The man pauses, considers it, and mutters, explains the lack of growling. Nearby, a group of younger drinkers are discussing omens. A comet seen last week. A sheep born with blue eyes. A priest with a nosebleed during Mass. The end is coming, one says with the glee of someone who's been waiting for it. You'll see, the sky will rain frogs. Your friend snorts into her drink. The sky already rained frogs last year, they just bounced. And while much of this chatter is nonsense, or at least highly embellished nonsense, some of it does contain a kernel of truth. You hear about a road being closed due to landslides, a monastery burned in the next shire over, a merchant caught smuggling relics disguised as turnips. These things likely happened. Probably. You think. Hopefully not the relics. The point is, if you want to know what's going on in the world, or at least what people think is going on, there's no better place than the tavern, and not just this one. Every village, town, and dusty roadside inn has its own version of this buzzing hive of stories. Together, they form a kind of oral network, equal parts terrifying and beautiful. And don't think it's just locals trading whispers. Travellers bring new threads into the weave, accents, songs, tall tales, and sometimes even actual facts. You hear someone reciting a Latin phrase in the corner, claiming it's a prophecy. Someone else corrects him. Turns out he was quoting a soup recipe. Still it spreads. You hear about people who travel tavern to tavern not for food or coin, but just to collect stories. Law chasers, someone calls them. Walk in parchment. One even claims to have memorised every known version of The Miller's Wife and the Haunted Loaf, which apparently ends with a talking biscuit and several arrests. And in this warm pocket of flickering candlelight and clinking mugs, you realise that even in a world without headlines or hashtags, people are still connected by the stories they share over drinks. It's messy, it's inconsistent, and it's perfect. So when someone turns to you and says, "Heard anything good lately?" you smile, sip your ale and lean in. Because tonight, you're not just drinking, you're part of the news. It's late now, so late that even the shadows seem tired. The fire's burned low, the embers crackling like old bones in the grate. Most of the wild ones have either staggered home or passed out under tables, and even Maud is moving slower behind the bar, wiping down mugs that don't need it just to keep her hands busy. The tavern has thinned out. What remains is a quiet hum, the tail end of a storm, the warm fog of a room that's just barely still awake. You're still upright, somehow. One boot off, your head resting on your palm, a mug half full of something lukewarm and suspicious. And that's when the voice comes. Calm, stern. No room for debate. "All right," says Maud. "That's it." No dramatic speech, no clanging bell or ceremonial closing hymn. Just a flat declaration that closing time has arrived, and the party, whatever was left of it, is over. A few people groan in protest. One man tries to start another song, but forgets the words halfway through the first line and falls asleep with his mouth open. A couple near the hearth continues to whisper, clearly hoping to outlast the shutdown. But Maud's already blowing out candles and muttering names like spells. She's not going to throw anyone out, not yet, but she's definitely encouraging departure via passive-aggressive dimming. You finish what's left in your mug, which might be ale, or might be water someone stored in a barley barrel. Either way, it tastes like end of night and regret. The warmth in the room starts to fade, not from the fire, but from the energy. You feel the hush settle in. A different kind of intimacy takes hold, less raucous, more fragile. The kind that only shows up when the music stops and people start remembering how tired they really are. A man across the room is mumbling apologies to someone who already left an hour ago. Another is trying to hug everyone in sight, including a coat rack. One woman just stares into her mug like it holds a prophecy she hasn't quite deciphered yet. And then comes the sweeping. That's the universal signal. When the tavern owner's son starts pushing a battered old broom across the floor, never looking directly at you, but always inching closer, it's time to go. No one likes to be the last to leave. That's when things get awkward. That's when you have to help stack the chairs or hear the owner's thoughts on taxes. You don't want that. So you stretch, groan and rise, slowly. Your knees creak like church doors. Your spine clicks into place like someone slapping shut a heavy book. You check your pockets. Half a crust of bread, one copper coin and a dried sprig of something that smells like time and bad decisions. No idea where you got it. You shuffle toward the door, but it's not a straight shot. Closing time in a medieval tavern means manoeuvring through the aftermath. Past bodies curled on benches, a man snoring into a puddle of mead, someone tangled in a fishing net, don't ask, and a large dog that definitely wasn't here earlier. He growls softly in his sleep. You tiptoe around him. At the door, Maud is pinning shut the ledger, muttering to herself. She catches your eye, nods once. Not a thank you, not exactly. More like, you didn't make a mess, so I tolerate your existence. High praise, really. You linger for just a moment. Not because you want to stay, your eyelids are made of lead and your feet feel like someone else's, but because leaving means re-entering the outside world. And right now, that world is dark, cold and unforgiving. In here, at least, you're surrounded by stale bread and poor life choices. Out there, it's just the moon and your own thoughts, not a comforting combo. Still you push open the door. The air hits you like a bucket of pond water, wet, cold and oddly aggressive. The night is pitch black, lit only by the softest slice of moonlight and a few guttering torches stuck into the mud outside. The sky is low, clouded. The stars hiding like they've got better things to do. You step into the muck, your one remaining boot sinking with a quiet squelch. Behind you, the tavern door swings shut with a final thud, like the chapter's closed. And it has. Because taverns don't have encores, not the real ones. When it's over, it's over. You can't beg for one more song or plead for another round. The ale is locked away, the fire is sleeping, and the floor is being swept with a vengeance. Out here, the silence is complete. You hear your own breath, your own boots. Somewhere in the distance, an owl asks a question you don't have the answer to. A branch creaks, a wolf howls, or maybe it's a drunk noble trying to find his horse. You start walking, unsure where you're headed. Back to a rented cot, a barn, a pile of hay behind the chapel. You're not picky. At this hour, anything horizontal is a blessing. Behind you, the tavern sits quiet and still, like it never held a room full of shouting and dancing and spilled gravy. Tomorrow, the stools will be upright again. The fire will be lit. Someone will sweep out the bones and bread crusts and misplace a turnip. The cycle will start anew. But tonight it sleeps, and so finally will you. You don't quite remember how you got back. You remember the door shutting behind you, the crunch of frost on the ground, and the wind sneaking its fingers down your collar like a thief. You remember stumbling past the chapel with its crooked steeple, blinking up at stars that looked like candle stubs stuck in the ceiling of the world. You remember a dog barking, or maybe that was you. But somehow, miraculously, questionably, you end up in a bed of sorts. It's straw mostly, some wood, definitely something sticky. You're in a communal lodging house, the medieval equivalent of a no-star inn. 1 room, 3 dozen souls, and the smell of feet, aged like fine cheese. A low fire crackles in a hearth that's lost interest in heating anyone more than 3 feet away. Around you, figures wrapped in wool, linen, and desperation snore, mutter, or just stare into the middle distance, too tired to close their eyes. You ease yourself down, ignoring the crunch beneath you that might be an old turnip or someone's lost molar, and let out a long, slow breath. And just like that, it's done. The night, the long, spiralling, unpredictable night in that medieval tavern has ended. And as you lie there, blinking up at a ceiling, held together by soot, spiders, and optimism, your mind does what minds always do after a long drink. It replays everything. You remember your first steps into the tavern, wide-eyed and slightly damp from the road. The smell of smoke and yeast and wet wool hitting your face like a welcome and a warning all at once. You remember the first mug full of grit and promise, the food, brown, beige, and better than it looked. The barmaid with the knives in her smile, the games of dice and the arguments about turnips, the noble's projectile regrets. And more than anything, you remember the feeling of it all. Raw, real, loud, human, messy in the best way. No pretension, no polish, just people with nothing in common but the shared decision to spend one more evening together, drowning their troubles in barley and bad decisions. Taverns in the medieval world weren't just places to drink, they were everything. They were community halls, dance floors, law courts, confessionals, theatres, and post offices rolled into one smoky, muddy, gloriously chaotic space. They were where you learned things, where you lost things, where you found things you never expected to care about. They were the pulse of the town. Each mug raised a heartbeat, each spilled drink a scar. And no matter where you came from, what you did, or how many coins you had in your purse, for a few hours in that low-ceilinged room, you were part of something. You were one of them. Of course, the hangover will follow. Maybe not just in your head, but in your knees, your spine, your soul. You'll wake up with your tongue glued to your teeth and a vague sense of regret shaped like a goose. But you'll also wake up with stories. Stories of the ale taster who sniffed your mug like a hound judging some soup. Of the mock trial where you were executed for excessive blinking. Of the barmaid who knew every secret before you even opened your mouth. Of the outlaw with the laugh like gravel and the rumour network that spun the night into legend. Because you didn't just visit a medieval tavern. You lived it. You drank its ale. You danced on its dirt. You told its lies and sang its songs. And now, here in the quiet aftermath, you're part of its history. One more ghost in its rafters. One more warm shape in its long memory. And if you listen, just as your eyes finally start to close, you might still hear it. The faintest echo of a chorus, a mug clink, a soft laugh beneath the hum of sleep. That's the tavern calling you back. Don't worry, it always will.